Good morning, everyone. We are here at the final wave. We are bringing you the best in post apocalypse tunes and conversation. I am your host, Tom Fire. Other stations may have backed out or perished into terrible oblivion, but we are here. Always providing you with company that won't try to eat your face.
The animated radio host voice rang out, the only one still standing, other than a few emergency broadcasts that would repeat until their source of power died. At 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, every single day, his voice would consistently ring out through the wastelands. 4 hours, filling the empty streets and homes, long abandoned by the people of the world. Anywhere that still had power would be able to listen in. Skeletons of former living beings decorated most of the homes. Humans, pets, livestock, and nearly all the world gradually died. Some areas had been reclaimed by nature, animals able to reforge their paths, and soon the urban landscape became blended in with nature. Eventually, nothing of the human world would remain. The remnants of raider camps lingered empty. Once busy places riddled with danger were no more. All the carnage was far away from the radio presenter's home, safe in the mountains. They were on top of an old watchtower, looking over a wild forest with some rare pockets of life, both plant and animal, distant from nearly everyone. It kept them safe and secure.
I have something that I want to talk about today. I know that it isn't likely that there's anyone left.
The voice that projected out every day was slowly becoming increasingly drained, yet willing to continue until the very end, sending out messages into the empty wastes, and recording the loss of humanity's history.
I've been thinking about how the world ended. Before all the other stations went dark. Unlike the final wave.
He added, gulped loudly, and let out a loud gasping sigh, and continued with sincerity.
There are so many theories about what happened, when it started, and who was the one who caused it all. But what we do know is the power grid went out worldwide for 3 days. Now, not a lot of people include this in their theories, and
Tom paused, stunned, as though he saw something out of the corner of his eye.
Uh-oh. The first wave of illnesses ran through the population. They couldn't tell what it was. It was completely alien.
Tom nearly addressed someone familiar, dear to his heart. Someone the listeners heard many times previously, before one day, her voice no longer echoed across the waves with his.
It doesn't just affect people. Animals, even some types of fungi, struggled to deal with it. It caught humanity completely off guard, even compared to all other crises society had been going through the decade leading up to it. Rapid technological advance, struggling economy, fewer resources.
He struggled to keep events in chronological order, trying to remember and process it all.
Let's see. I guess I should explain to the new bloods. Wait. I should explain every term that I used yesterday, and I suppose what I will be using. New bloods are people born in the chaos, and they just don't remember what life was like before. When I heard one on the radio, years ago now, they didn't believe their dad when they told them about all the things humanity had.
Tom smiled, happy at the memory.
Then there are the feral children. Those born after everything really broke down.
He shuddered at the mention of the feral children. The memories of human de-evolution lingered in his mind, and the recorded reports of what they had turned into.
Humans have always done what they have to in order to survive. Murder, theft. But these ferals travel in packs and attack blindly. A couple of years ago, I heard about people trying to rehab them. Take them in, feed them, teach them to speak, and
He winced at the memory. His hand flicked through the well-worn pages concerning their dealings with those who found them. One page had notes while the opposite side had drawings that continued for pages afterward. An orphanage had been plundered. Those who wanted to help the children, slowly tortured and torn apart, their bodies strung up on the church, their innards hanging out of their corpses, and twisty, rusty nails driven into their bones to hold them upright. The fortunate ones died before this occurred, while the unlucky ones were feasted on while they were still alive.
try to make them human again.
What did it even mean to be human anymore? Did anyone know? Was there even something that resembled humanity?
Ultimately, they ended up killing them. I don't know what happened to them after that. People would mention them occasionally on the radio, and then silence.
He went back to his catchy radio-esque voice.
So, if you're out there, keep an eye out for them. By all accounts, they're still out there, so watch your back for the tiny terrors.
The acid rain started again. He put on his worn, patched-up jacket, lifted up his hoodie to protect himself in case a stray droplet would slip through the metal sheet roof. It had been patched up many times, both by Tom and the previous residents who stayed here. When the weather cleared up, he would need to inspect the damage before trying to find any supplies.
No, I got ahead of myself. That was all much later. Okay, back to what I was talking about.
He paused, trying to put his thoughts back in order.
Oh, yeah. The illnesses started the chaos because it impacted crops and livestock. There were economic crashes, and countries were unwilling to share their aid with each other.
He stopped to look over at an empty chair that rested close to his, as though waiting for something to happen. Once it didn't, Tom continued with his explanation.
There were wars over resources, not unlike the past, but this time for food, fertile land, water, space without the illnesses. It ended up spreading it more.
He took a mouthful of clean rainwater out of a well-beaten metal cup. When he first got it, it was shiny and bright, no more.
From what I can remember, France, Spain, and somewhere else all fell into complete anarchy. World leaders apparently abandoned everyone and spent their time either on naval vessels or in underground bunkers. There were rumors that they engineered this as part of a cleanse to bring the population to a manageable level. I think if that was their intention, it worked too well. You know, with the likely extinction of humanity.
He debated mentioning the more outlandish claims, the possibilities that people would talk about when they were sure other people weren't listening. His words offered comfort to himself. However, this time, there was a living listener. A gloved hand reached to turn the dial, increasing the volume of the broadcast, and remembering his voice, familiar, constant, and made them think of the few safe homes they had. Their outer clothing concealed them completely, coated in ash and dark snow, hidden away from the extreme weather. The individual was inside an abandoned motor store, connected to a gas station. The road now barely visible under layers of ash and snow. There was no sign, having fallen off long ago, and any cracks in the walls brought in vines or other plants. The person listened while going back to scavenging items from one of the lockers. Only the scrap in the roughest condition was left.
For the sake of record keeping, I guess I could tell you about the weirder claims. Some people suggested aliens and their involvement on the planet, and that it was sent by an asteroid, while others say it was created in a lab to cure one ailment, only to release something much worse.
Now he thought about it more. The possibilities made sense. With a lead pencil, he grumbled to himself while he sketched every possibility. In thick black lettering, he wrote "Possibilities" on the first page. The old school book still had many pages left to be filled.
Those theories aside, many countries broke down and no longer exist today. Canada doesn't exist. I heard their prime minister and all the officials were executed by an angry mob. I can understand people's rage. So many things could have been done. Unfortunately, this only made things so much worse. And then, the warlords started.
The radio host took a loud gulp of his drink, reflected some more, and let out a long sigh. Tom couldn't remember exactly which countries managed to last the longest, nor the names of the smaller countries that rose and nearly instantly fell.
I made a record of everything I could remember. Any rumor or possibility of what happened before and after. I wrote it all down, even did some carvings on pieces of stone and wood in hopes that something would survive.
He scoffed at this, flipping through one of the many handwritten books with writing and drawings of variable quality. One showed two people aiming guns at each other. Another had hordes of starving people walking through the streets of a once prosperous city, with the ruins of buildings on either side. A pile of skulls with a teenager looking up at the mountainous peak.
But I don't think there will be many people around. Survivors, I mean.
His mid-sentence pause lingered, a sob in the back of his throat.
You're doing a great job.
He imagined her hands on his shoulders, standing behind him and stroking his hair. Even her ghostly hands were warm, soothing. He knew she wasn't there. She died years ago to the flu, when they rescued a drifter who too perished, leaving him here by himself. If only they had kept him away, threatened him with death or forced him to leave, she would still be alive. He closed his eyes, and soon she disappeared. The loss he could never recover from. Her words gave him confidence to continue.
I hope there are other people. If you're still here, please stay safe, and you may be the future of the human race. I would love to see you, and speak to you, but
He paused to consider his words.
I don't know if you will even understand me. Not everyone speaks English. I remember I managed to get in touch with someone. Neither of us could understand what the other was saying, but
He smiled, and you could hear it in his voice. It wouldn't matter much, considering the radio waves no longer traveled as far as they used to.
I don't think he found someone. I think he was German, or maybe Dutch. Eventually, his signal became blurry before it finally faded out.
I remember him. I think the two of you could have been friends.
Mallory's voice was soft, gentle. Tom turned to look at her side of the desk. He kept everything she had there. A necklace her aunt gave her. A random toy they found when they were scavenging for supplies. And perhaps his favorite, a ring that hung from a necklace. One of the few that hadn't been looted after the world collapsed. Tom's hand reached out and took the ring in his hand.
I wish you weren't here alone. It would be good for you to have a friend.
He knew she wasn't there. Maybe it was his subconscious trying to keep him connected to the world. Either way, every day, he knew he needed to hear her, and she always appeared at least once. There had been too much dead air. No one wanted dead air, especially when there was no more music to be played. Tom cleared his throat. forced a smile.
Sorry about that, folks. I missed where I was, again.
He sighed, doubting anyone was listening. Why not speak on matters that were personal? Even among the loss of the world, there were numerous tragedies that haunted individuals before they passed. The individual from the motor store stayed there, setting up a temporary camp, and took out a portable radio to tinker with. The surface was scratched. There were scrap marks, but it tried to pick up the frequency. It didn't work, but the concealed person kept working to find a solution.
I'm sure you all remember Mighty Mallory, my co-host with the most.
He smiled, remembering how the pair would share the microphone and send their message out, well, for all time's sake.
Hello, listeners. It is your co-host with the most. I am Tom Fire.
And I'm Mighty Mallory.
And we're the final wave. Other stations may have backed out, or perished into terrible oblivion, but here we are, always providing you with company that won't try to eat your face.
The animatic and bright radio host voice was gone. His tone went back to a serious one.
It was a few years ago now. It's hard to keep track of time, and we've never publicly spoken about our story. While I enjoy sharing other people's stories and that of the world, I think it's only fair for us to share ours. Considering everything, I'd say we were pretty fortunate.
A tear ran down his cheek, a surprisingly happy one, and he looked to her empty wooden chair. She had a pillow decorated with teddy bears holding different kinds of cakes. It seemed so out of place in the apocalypse, and she never gave in to the negativity or the cruelty of it all.
You don't have to do this if it upsets you. You know I'm here, and that's what matters.
She was seated there now, her elbows on the table, as she looked at him with those hazel eyes.
I mentioned the illnesses that went around, and we were both unaffected, completely healthy. Our families and friends weren't so lucky, and we ended up burying them.
Some he clearly remembered well, and others had faded off to become a distant memory.
Together, we decided to travel down the coast rather than inland. At one point, we talked about getting a boat and traveling the oceans, finding an island that wasn't impacted by the virus, and spending our time enjoying ourselves. It was the first time we saw two different raider groups attack each other. They were trying to get a hold over the docks.
He remembered, if it was a movie of some kind, they'd each be given different colors, or uniforms, or backstories about who they were. In reality, both sides looked so similar that even they had trouble telling each other apart.
Oh, I remember them. We hid in a drainage ditch and watched them leave. I'm pretty sure I begged you to kill me before they got us.
The pair chuckled with dark gallows humor.
We kept walking along the shore and found a beached vessel. I remember the stench. I had to keep pointing my gun inside in case it was a trap, and Mallory opened the door. There were piles of bodies of people. I couldn't tell where they were originally from. They looked like skeletons. You wouldn't believe the smell. The only survivor was a small boy, malnourished, and he couldn't speak. He was past the point of survival. Not without a hospital, and well, there was no chance of that happening.
His voice drifted off, sad and numb, clearly hating the situation.
That poor boy. You were kind to him, though. We looked after him until he died.
I hate saying this, but while we didn't kill him,
We looked after him.
She interjected.
we stepped over his body and looted what supplies they had. I remember pulling a handgun off one of the corpses, still with bullets, and I wondered why they hadn't used it on themselves.
They had hope.
The voice echoed through the surviving radios across the wastelands. A mixed tale of morality given the changing circumstances. The boat in question was long looted multiple times, having many owners, and finally lay at the ocean floor. A rusting memory, and now a home for the surviving crustacean life forms. Still, the lone figure kept trying to fix the portable radio, guided by the familiar sounds, trying to get a consistent signal so they would leave and still listen, hopeful of a chance to meet with other people.
I kept it. I think it is in my bag somewhere, just in case.
He knew exactly where it was. While they were welcoming, a safe place to live was a treasure, and something worth protecting. His foot rested on the bag filled with a variety of weapons. Knives, guns, even an old sword that could be utilized if the need arose. His favorite gun sat fully loaded, safety off, and ready to fire. It sat ready on the desk in case someone decided to climb the stairs. So far, no one did. There were his pencils, sharpeners, and various notepads that kept a record of the events. In the corner were the sleeping bags, a small stove to cook and boil water, and a bug-out bag in case he needed to flee. Not that he wanted to. This was home now. The only other thing that resided on the desk was a microphone that shared the stories of the Wasteland.
Morality was blurred. I remember we nearly joined one of the communities that were starting up. They wanted to build a safe town where the old ethics of the world came back.
Tom smiled, the memory bittersweet, and he tapped his fingers on the surface of the table and stopped when he realized what he was doing.
I wish that place worked out. There were about 4, I remember. One sounded like it was right out of The Walking Dead.
Her image smiled, remembering one of the many television shows they would watch together. The real apocalypse and post-apocalypse weren't as entertaining.
Most were overrun, or so I heard. I remember hearing about one group ending up trying to move back up north to try and find safety. This was long before we found the radio station, so we don't know what happened to them. No, Stevie and Rachel, if you can hear me, I hope you guys made it.
It was unlikely that they did. Most didn't survive. Not that he wanted to think about it. Again, there was more dead air, as he was caught up in his thoughts and memories, unable to shake them.
They were a really nice couple. Steve and Roger were also great too. I wish there had been a way for us to keep in touch.
I wish that some of those places worked out.
He sighed, remembering some of the communities that did thrive. For a time.
There were raider groups ruled by warlords that never lasted long. They were good at killing, plundering, and destroying lives, but providing housing, medicine, and food?
Tom snored with distaste, recalling the rare times they had come across them, and somehow they managed to avoid being enslaved, branded, and kept as livestock.
I wonder sometimes if this is what happened in ancient times. I know it's a conspiracy theory, but I wonder how many smaller apocalypses humanity has had that we just didn't know about. I remember watching... Christ, what was it called?
He drummed his palms on the surface of the desk, trying to think of what program he had been obsessed with.
It was about how there were advanced civilizations, and then for whatever reason, humanity was pushed back into the Dark Ages.
Ancient aliens?
Yes, Ancient Aliens. That's the one.
He stopped, realizing he had outright spoken with Mallory. Who was even around to judge him?
I hated that show so much.
She laughed with good humor. Tom could nearly forget she was dead, especially with how they would still joke. It all felt the same.
I don't think humanity will be coming back from this one, though.
More dead air. The rain continued longer than expected, pouring down, and he looked out the window into the dark. The sight of trees swaying, and the clouds continuing their onslaught on the plant matter underneath. Hopefully, any of the surviving animals had found a place to shelter in it all.
One group, well, there were multiple ones, I have proof of this one, were the groups based around religion. That this whole event was caused by God or the Antichrist, or whatever variation of it.
He flicked through the book, grumbling to himself about how he should have marked things better, and finally found the correct pages. Sprawled across them were drawings of a variety of religious symbols, old and new, along with worshippers around a person, or some kind of idol, praying or slaving away to build something out of scrap metal or old cars.
I remember a broadcast asking people to go to San Francisco, telling them that the city was being purged of all sin, and if you wished to be forgiven, you would travel down there, join in, and be free. I think some innocent people would get caught up with groups rather than do things on their own. The whole safety in group mentality.
Tom wrinkled his nose in complete disgust.
You only ever killed because you had to. I can't remember you ever wanting someone dead.
He gave her a skeptical look followed by an apologetic one.
There are plenty of people I wanted dead.
He never forgot each life he was forced to take, in order to protect them both. The first one was a burglar who came to their house when the world was gradually falling apart with a long knife, demanding their supplies or he would kill them. Tom tried to warn him, once, twice, more until he threatened Mallory, and Tom shot him in the chest, killing him nearly instantly. They knew things were bad when the police didn't bother to arrest the intruder, nor did they take him to jail. Tom knew things were definitely breaking down.
I think it is a universal thing in our world now. Everyone has killed to protect what they have, or
He struggled to hide his disgust.
take what they needed to in order to make it through.
More dead air. Tom sat wondering what the Tom of the past would have thought of him. Would he have been able to recognize himself?
There were so many groups that claimed to be the Messiah, the Promised Land. It wasn't solely an American phenomena either. I remember reports from the UK, and even far away in Australia too.
He paused, thinking to himself.
I can't remember how all of these groups fell apart. Infighting, inbreeding, the people turning on their prophets.
He kept listing the various possibilities off on his fingertips. The truth was, no one except those involved would know for sure.
Food shortages, disease, another group coming in and wiping them out. Not everyone will believe their lies, even if someone's community would.
Some of those groups needed to be destroyed. I wish the innocent people wouldn't get caught up in it all.
Other than children, and I mean incredibly young children, no one is innocent or guiltless in this world.
The rain was slowing down now, still too dangerous and too wet to do any work on it. He lowered the setting on their gaslight and pulled down the heavy blanket that served as a curtain to keep out the light. In a dark world, any light attracted those who wished to feast, and he had no desire to turn the tower into a beacon. It was barely creeping up at midday, but the sky was dark like nighttime. Ever since the last man who had brought a disease with him ended up killing Mallory, he hadn't seen a single living soul. Not even the corpses were fresh anymore.
sometimes, late at night, I sit and think about what I had to do to survive. Mal and I, during the first Great Famine, had made a pact with each other. If one of us died first, the other would cut up, store the meats, and eat it so the other would have a chance of surviving.
Please don't remind me. I hated that pact.
I know you did.
And we made it out.
She leaned forward, only Tom able to hear her.
And we didn't need to eat each other.
I remember there were times when we would find our way to trade in communities. We'd buy or trade whatever they needed for some minced meat, and it has always been in the back of my mind that I ate human meat that day.
He felt an uneasy, sickly feeling in his stomach at the possibility, and knew there were other circumstances he hadn't told Mallory about. All that mattered was keeping them both fed and healthy, even if he failed on the latter.
What? No.
It tasted like pork, didn't it?
Yes?
And how many pigs did you see or smell?
The question left an uncomfortable silence in the air. He wished he could have discussed all this with Mallory, on the air while she was still alive. She often acted as his conscience while he was alive and in death. Mallory personified it. She didn't answer him. Her gaze lingered on him, and slowly, she disappeared to wherever she went again. He gave her direction a longing look, yet knew she would return, as she always did.
I didn't see or smell any. There were plenty of people, though. Far too many for a settlement like that to manage. It was the reason why Mal and I had to make our escape. I can't remember the name of the town anymore.
He quickly flicked through the pages, trying to find something to kickstart his memory, and reached over to pick up another book.
Ah, damn it. I'll let you know when I find it. I don't think it lasted long.
He tapped his fingertips, trying to think of the next topic of conversation, and wished there was a way for survivors to contact him. Imagine interviewing someone while they were trying to survive. What skills they learned, what advice they had, and just the feeling of not being alone.
I've debated doing this for a while.
He began. Once this information was out, there was no way to get it back.
I've been tempted to share my coordinates with my amazing listeners. And if you are interested, you can come out this way and live with me in a little community.
He looked over to see if Mallory had returned. Her chair was still empty.
I know I was just talking about cannibalism. I promise, on my word, I won't try to eat someone who comes out here to visit me. So long as you don't do the same. Deal?
Tom offered, waiting as though someone was listening in and agreeing. If he heard it, he would definitely be wary, and sure whoever said it would certainly try and eat him. He let out a long, soft groan.
I hate the fact that I might be the last human left. The loneliness of being the last is unbearable. Before the world fell, I didn't have a lot of friends, and I preferred to stick to myself, Mal, and maybe a couple of others. If this ends with me, what can I say that humanity has done for the planet, or even ourselves? In barely the blink of an eye, humanity has destroyed itself and everything around us, and...
He paused, stood up, and his chair loudly moved across the floor. Tom opened up a drawer, the remnants of the items they found when they came to the tower, and it became their home. He pulled out an aged bottle of whiskey. He rubbed the label, and could barely manage to make out the lettering.
You know, it's time for something a little stronger than water.
Tom gulped up the rest of the day's rations. Even alone, He kept things orderly. With his lips still wet, he opened the bottle and poured it in, close to the brim. The aroma of alcohol was strong and caused him to exhale.
I promised to only open this when I came across another person, but since that's looking unlikely, I'll do it.
He took a mouthful and winced at the flavor before swallowing it down.
I wonder what will come next. See, first it was the ocean life, then the dinosaurs, and then the massive mammals, followed by humans.
He reflected, leaned back in his chair and imagined.
What species will rise to sentience, taking over the planet? And will they look at our ruins, wondering how we could have been so damn stupid? Or would they just forget it, not worrying or caring about us and our achievements?
Finally, there was a burst of static from the repair shop, and the figure let out a cry of happiness. The sound of the final wave came through. It was turned off to conserve the batteries, and they waited for the dark sky to clear up to make travel easier. Tom took a loud gulp, still not used to the taste.
Fuck it. The coordinates are 45.2156 degrees north, 88.4648 degrees west, if anyone would like to come visit.
I hope someone will, just so you won't be alone anymore.
She was back, this time seated on their sleeping bag, her arms hugging her legs, and a mug of tea beside her. Overall, a cozy image for the apocalypse. Tom didn't answer her. He knew Mallory wouldn't like it, but his mind was made up. If he was the last human, there was no more responsibility to anyone, and he could do what he wanted. He reached under the desk for a cocktail of tablets they found on their travels. Using the metal mug, he started to slowly crush them up.
The apocalypse has been an adventure, that's for sure.
He murmured, still working, until it was all a fine powder. He brushed into his mug.
I hope someone will find us, and our place. There is still some food here. Not a lot, but some. We have seeds, water set up, everything someone would need to begin again. I'd rather have someone use it rather than leave it.
His eyelids felt heavy, his throat tight, and he lay down beside Mallory's ghost. She cupped his cheek, and they gazed at each other. The microphone cord dragged along the floor. He took it in his hand.
This is the final wave. I'm signing off for the last time. Our broadcasts will keep going.
He choked, feeling his heartbeat slow down, and then barely beat at all.
This message repeats.
The door was kicked open. A figure entered with a gun drawn. The figure aimed at all potential hiding spots in the room, one after another. Only when it was clear did the person have a proper look around to see the items. They had been spoken of so many times before. They looked to see a skeleton laying with their arm around empty space, with a ring inside a necklace in his rotted hand. Everything was exactly as described, and as promised. It had been so long that the vermin who feasted had long perished themselves. The hood was brushed back to reveal a young woman's heavily scarred face. She smiled softly at them. "Thank you for getting me through the apocalypse. Tom Fire, Mighty Mallory, and the final wave," she whispered, took the necklace and microphone to place back on the desk. Using the sleeping bag, she took Tom's corpse outside and gave it a burial as best she could before returning to her new home, unable to tell quite how long it had been. "I was a child when I first heard your voices." She kept everything in place, only adding her portable radio to the desk and tapping the microphone with a dirty fingernail. She cleared her throat a couple of times, building the courage to do what she dreamt of ever since she could remember. Hello? Hello. This is Wandering Kid letting you know that humanity still lives. She picked up the bowl of whiskey, took a mouthful, made a disgusted face, and put it straight back down again. In tribute to Tom Fire and Mighty Mallory, the final wave is officially back on the air with news of the Wasteland. I'm pleased to tell you that all is not lost. There is a town called New Texas that has been settled for 5 years, and... She beamed, grinning happily. The disease has not gone down there as far. There are rumors that some people have developed a natural immunity, and there have also been reports of international survivors.
See? I told you.
Wandering Kid kept talking, updating the world of the events that happened, oblivious to them standing behind her, their ghostly forms semi-transparent.
Told me what?
You weren't going to be alone.
She got a chill down her spine and glanced back, unable to see them, but deep down knew they were there. She smiled and went back to work. I've been here for the better part of a year, alone. The remains of my brief companions, the soldiers, Lawson, Garcia, Diaz, Markov, Bellinger, Worthington, and finally, Dr. Robertson through his notes. The men I'd come to know when they came for Robertson's records. Something that could drive back the undead, once and for all. Vaccinate with the RG1 treatment, enough to stop someone from turning, resulting in Bellinger and Markov turning into intelligent and even more dangerous undead before the RG2A was given. The RG1 saved my life after the tactical bomb was launched. The weapon blasted, destroying most biomatter and causing the soldiers to rise from the dead. They all still drew close to the encampment where they had died from the impact. The infection caused their bodies to endure. Even with their bodies changed, I could still recognize and guide them. The undead, a majority, ended up perishing, only for the site to draw more of their kind throughout the land. Car parks with rotted and rusty cars, through once busy streets, and inside abandoned buildings. I could never work out what they were searching for. Their empty cries echoed out, and there were no living people to hear them. Their radiated flesh clung from their bodies, and their bottom jaws had long fallen off. Their wanderings were limited to the area close to their old encampment, and soon, those sparse in number fell apart. Even in death, determined to protect their target, their bodies were nothing but ash, with their heads still moving, and open mouths reaching for life that no longer roamed. I don't think there was anything living here. Since I was lonely, I took tokens from their clothing, or mementos from them. While they still recognized me, I would take them into a shed that was their makeshift bedroom to give them a routine, feeding them small, mutated rodents that I'd managed to catch, and slowly they turned into mindless, drawling beasts, leaving me with a feeling of lingering, relentless loneliness. I miss their whispering, even the malicious ones. Yet soon, those were just like the others, silent, blurring into a monotonous similarity. I remembered being thrust on the ground with, I can't remember who it was, protecting me. The impact blasted my ears and my eyes, only with the silence of the dead, and when I woke up, the world was different. Any whispers from them no longer filled the void, and for the first time, I longed to hear them. I kept the briefcase with a cure and other documents safe during this time, waiting for someone to come and collect it. Using a long set of handcuffs to keep it secured, it had cut into my skin, leaving an open slit that didn't bleed and nor did it heal. The pain was complicated. Occasionally, I could feel my skin being pierced and pulled, then followed by a slow ache. Then, nothing. I'd regularly have to check my body to ensure nothing was damaged or about to fall off. Around the borders of the toxic land, I'd see small groups of people wearing camo, the same gear as the other soldiers, and later, people heavily covered in protective gear, only to retreat quickly. Staring through binoculars, I'd see them get close, hungry for the wealth or knowledge that still lingered here. Or perhaps, did they know about Dr. Robertson's research? I used to see birds and the occasional rodent roaming about. Now, they avoided this place, with only a few born here developing large cysts before perishing after short, pain-riddled lives. I saw one, a pregnant rat with a bulging belly, and she gave birth to twisting, undead baby rodents who began devouring their unfortunate mother. Unwilling to prevent it from spreading, I slammed my heel down, completely crushing them and ignoring their twisted cries for help. In my journal, I scribbled drawings of my daily life, hoping that someone living would find me one day. Worthington's advice still repeated in my mind on repeat. Good luck. Keep it safe for our regiment to come and clean the place up. Give the documents to them. Give the documents to them. Give the documents to them. The equipment had survived. Dr. Robertson's notes still remained intact, though now highly irradiated. The Geiger counter's noise became rapid when I hovered the machine over it, going to critical levels, repeatedly striking red with the arrow. I knew the machinery would eventually run down over time. I'd go between the treehouse that had been my home, the oversized mansion, a place that had been owned by the wealthiest family in town and had become my secondary, and finally, the outpost where we waited while the bomb dropped. I'd sit on the ground, listening to a broken television playing on repeat. The long beep demonstrated a lack of signal, yet it was reassuring, knowing there was still power somewhere. The static image would flicker, and one time I was sure I saw a woman in a room talking. That meant that people were still alive. I began imagining people around me, heading to the local diner, going home after a long day at work, and a general routine. Over time, the atmosphere changed. I couldn't see the stars anymore, their shine concealed by a thick mass of black clouds. No longer would the undead gaze into the stars, the world now unknown to them. The rain was black and sizzled when it touched the undead, who seemed immune. I wouldn't hesitate to walk through it. While it didn't hurt me, it burned, and I knew it wasn't wise. Any clothing I wore out in it soon disintegrated, leaving patches of exposed skin. When the dead wandered past, I still spoke to them. At first, they recognized me and would shamble toward me, unsure why, yet now they walked right past me. Occasionally a stray animal would enter, unable to get away, only for the undead to show no interest in them, and the animal, unfortunately for it, would perish before starvation would strangle it of life. I wondered if another bright light would come from the sky and finish us off. none came, leaving us to linger in this unholy purgatory. When I walked to the far eastern side, I occasionally heard faint radio transmissions echoing through the land. They cracked with the static of long-dead voices, each one gripped in pain as the world fell around them. I couldn't tell exactly how old these messages were, forever stuck on a loop.
The infection has reached Bridgeport. Don't go out at night. Be sure to isolate any infected, and euthanasia is permitted by law. People are advised to go to safe zones. Stay off the roads.
I fear for us. Please. I don't know what we're going to do. I think this is our end, folks. There's nothing more we can do.
Martial law has been declared. Looters and deserters are to be shot on sight.
The time has come, folks. Grab your guns and get ready for survival. There is no law. Nothing. We need to kill them all, or we will all die.
So, folks, this is signing off. Looks like everything has failed. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. We never found the answers, and the cure, it failed. I hope that your final days are spent well.
The world was gone, replaced by old radio signals and the unyielding groans of the undead. It all fizzled out into static, with traces of voices coming through. And finally, nothing but silence. I kept coming back weeks later, hoping it would be fixed, and each day I was left waiting. The perpetual silence loomed. I wished I could hear something. Even the shuffling and groans of the undead became fewer. If only the radio worked, and I was physically able. I could have told them I had a cure. All they needed to do was come collect it. Soon, these remnants of the past became fewer, until they ceased to be. Time was no longer a factor, and I found I no longer needed to eat. However, I'd sit in one of the decaying houses, listening to the sound of acidic rain outside, with an empty plate in front of me. Every drop of water added a sizzle to the outside. Still, I'd sit inside at the kitchen table, with utensils neatly on one side, and a teddy bear in front of the other. It had a plate of its own. I'd pretend to serve it invisible food, gesturing with my hands to see if it wanted more. And we were halfway through our dinner when I heard footsteps down the main road. I ignored it. Perhaps my mind had finally lost grip on reality. I stood, walked over to the broken glass window, and peered out. There were a trio of people, and blinking, I rubbed my eyes to confirm that they were, in fact, real. Fortunately, they weren't figments of a broken imagination. They continued to run down the damaged, uneven pavement through the main street, and wore bright yellow protective suits. They carried rifles in their hands and killed any zombie that stood in their way. Sensing that fresh meat was available, the zombies shambled towards them. And it was the first time I saw them actively hunt. I don't know how long it had been. Fortunately, they weren't intelligent like they had been, nor capable of speech. I wanted to call out to them, but without my tongue, it was hopeless. And seeing how I resembled the undead, I figured they would shoot me on sight. Were these the people I was waiting for? Their voices muffled through the gas masks.
Quick, we can't wait here. We're already short on time.
When we get it, it will be worthwhile.
The one at the back didn't speak. Instead gestured with a forward hand movement to push them to go on. The previous two were more erratic, while the one at the rear was steady, assured. It was strange to hear voices, living ones rather than recordings. They headed toward the old encampment and ran along the outskirts of town. I was going to wave goodbye to the teddy bear, but I took the briefcase and one of the old handguns with me, stolen from Garcia's body, and trailed behind them, ensuring I wasn't seen. The undead usually ignored me, but now they tried to push past or through me in order to reach their target. I held the briefcase by the handle, allowing the chain to dangle down, and headed toward them. I trailed behind, allowing the undead to push past me and acting as cover in case they fired. They opened up the old tents, rummaged around, and started touching the tech, removing the hard drives. The old barrier, limited though it was, protected them from the zombies, who gradually approached and wandered away, leaving them to their task.
Dr. Worthington's work was received by the secondary team. It's supposed to be in a briefcase.
She looked around, finding many pieces of equipment had been damaged, mostly the old radio equipment first damaged by the blast, and the natural decay of time. Plants had grown over the pieces before dying, and becoming food for a neon green fungi that too perished.
We can't be out here too long.
We scan, upload, and get out.
The commander spoke.
I wish we could take more of this with us.
He stared out at the broken town.
Have you ever been on a mission that was so quiet?
The machine beeped several times, causing him to freeze and stare down at it.
Focus on your work.
He insisted, standing guard with his rifle ready and scanning the horizon for any threats. For the moment, the undead were distracted by the damaged beacons, depleted in power, enough to keep them at bay.
Yes, sir.
The scientist replied after a pause. I wanted to know whether to approach them or not, keeping an eye on them at a distance. My body was concealed by pieces of wreckage. I was scared, but I made a promise many years ago to ensure it was delivered. Watching them while they started to stumble and feel the effect of the radiation. Or perhaps they had been on the road for a considerable amount of time. I made a low grunting sound, only for them to spin around and aim their guns in my direction. I held up the briefcase, waving my free hand, and smiled at them before pointing at it. I needed them to know I wasn't one of the undead. I walked warily. Despite their hostility, I was happy to be around people, hoping they would listen rather than open fire on me. They looked at each other.
Sir! Sir!
Sir, what do...
Fucking hell.
There were no identifying markings on the yellow radiation suit. No badge nor branch number, state symbol, or national flag. I noticed an oxygen tank on their backs, but none of them brought extra supplies. Barely enough food and water to escape. However, one was stockier than the others, and I guess he was a soldier of some kind. I gestured for them to lower their rifles, and surprisingly, they did so. I saw my reflection in their visors, and no longer did I have any speculation. It was a fact. I looked like a zombie. My skin was grey, with thick cracks, and my hair had fallen out in clumps, leaving bald, sore-ridden patches. My hands were barren and marked, and my fingernails were missing. The gradual process of decay had gone unnoticed. My mouth opened in surprise, and the dread horror filled me. I moved my head from side to side, studying my face. I suddenly lifted the briefcase and held it out to them, which caused them to jump.
Sir, what is she?
A male voice spluttered.
She could be the one Lawson mentioned before they went dark. How is she still alive?
We can't take her with us. Get the briefcase.
His cold, methodical tone scared me, and the two approached. He held a knife in his hand, and I knew what they wanted. I screamed with only a garbled sound responding, pointing frantically toward the treehouse, hoping they would let me find the key, and neither bothered to listen. I struggled while they held me down, face first in the radiated grass, wanting to run, and felt a cold bite. Suddenly, the briefcase was no longer attached to me. I screamed, a dread rasping sound, and once they released me, I rested on my knees. My blood was black and thick, and I put my hand over it, squeezing desperately to prevent the blood loss.
Put it out of its misery.
The dismissive order came, and the briefcase was opened with a pocket knife. The small lock popped open, and documents, updated vaccine, and a chip were inside. They hesitated to kill me, and through the mask, I could see a full-on look of pity, even remorse for what they had to do.
Sir, I think she is...
Her eyes peered through the blood-soaked visor.
Take her blood and brain matter. Put it in the device. We've been out here too long.
His voice was coarse.
I'm sorry, I don't want to hurt you. Please, stay still.
She put her hands up, trying to show me she wasn't a threat. Lying to me. Shaking my head, I tried to warn them without words, putting up my arms in surrender and defense, cautioning them about getting too close. I struck out with my stump, yet my muscles, having wasted away, were no match for them. I didn't want to injure them, and soon I was pinned. Again. My face on the rotting dirt, an animalistic hollowed sound echoing from my throat as I screamed at the indignity. A large syringe drew out my blood, watching it get drawn up. They were taking too much, leaving me exhausted, weak. I jerked my arm, roughly causing the glass to break. It pierced her suit, penetrating her skin, and her blood spilled out, mingling with my own. The commander aimed his rifle at me, but still, he hesitated and waited while she and the other scientist tried to prevent the bleeding.
We need to patch up her suit. Sir, what do we do? Sir?
He demanded, his hands trying to keep the slit closed.
We're going to need to get back to the base as soon as possible to treat this. The exposure will...
He yelled when he was pricked with my blood, screaming and stopping to grip his hand to stop it from spreading. They jerked, coughing, too distracted with their own doom. Fortunately for me, their focus elsewhere, and I could slink away to hide behind damaged cars, while the commander's rifle moved to point in their direction. The pair started coughing mildly before it descended into hoarse barks. The one in command ignored them and took out a device, connecting it with a cord, and a couple of beeps told me whatever information was being uploaded. He opened the folders, taking photographs of every single piece of document. turning them over to get copies of both sides. Briefly, I saw a picture of Dr. Robertson, some of the early infected, and the notes concerning the intelligent zombies. He wiped some of the updated vaccine on a slide, allowing it too to upload, only for a distinct, loud beep. A system failure. He smacked the device, swearing under his breath. Their rasping cough became a hacking one, and blood splatters appeared on their visors, red and fresh.
What's happening?
Sir, what's happening to us?
He didn't respond to them, carrying out his task before he halted. I thought he was going to assist his fellows. I looked out, trying to find the best way to escape where I wouldn't be gunned down. I stared in shock. Infection? Radiation? I'm not sure which it was. Their bodies rocked, tensely twisted, and their hands raised in unnatural, coarse movements. He held the rifle at them, firing the gun, shooting 10 bullets into their chests, one after another. Their bodies jerked and they fell down dead. I waited, staring at them, waiting for what would come. Shuffling on my knees to move behind him, abandoning my discarded hand, and watch while he aimed the rifle at me. A long, hissing moan went through the mic, and my attached hand pointed harshly at them.
What the fuck?
This time, he shot them in the head. Fragments of plastic, bone, and brain matter blew into the air. His time in an undead world paid off, and he went back to scanning the notes stoically, unbothered by what happened. Their bodies were limp, yet something lingered inside. I crawled on one hand and my knees, staring at the broken remains of the woman's face. An eye in one place with exposed brain matter. The oxygen tank wheezed with the remnants escaping. I turned the gauge on it, figuring I could use it as a weapon. I closed my eyes when I heard that dreaded and far too familiar sound. I closed my eyes and saw one chewing on my severed hand, crunching a finger and pulling it away from the knuckle. The other scientist crawled over, eagerly pulling on the thumb and twisting it right off.
How?
He whispered, finally sounding out of his element. With smug satisfaction, I took his arm and pointed in the direction of the town frantically and silently, not wanting to lure their attention back to us. I don't know which one of us made the sound. A rock moving disturbed them, and the pair gave us a knowing, hungry look with their remaining eye, and shook the remains of their necks at us. Thus far, the undead had mostly left us alone. I didn't wait to see if they would start speaking to us, for I knew they had to be something else. Something far more dangerous. I took his elbow, and together we ran toward the town. The undead left me alone. They approached him with outstretched hands, and now they no longer felt like a threat. I knew every single building in town, inside and out. I knew the perfect location, since the undead never traveled below. We, or he, would be safe. I gestured to him, and to my surprise, he complied when we ran to a manhole, opening the lid while the undead circled us. He followed, 2 steps behind me, and I had no choice but to accept it. We came to a grey door with "Maintenance" written in faded red paint, and I opened the door, listened for a moment, and gestured with my stump for him to enter. The bleeding had stopped. It tingled occasionally, and he entered, always keeping an eye on me, turning his back to the door frame and using the light on his weapon to shine into the room. After inspecting it, he made his way inside while I closed the door. In the dark, I blinked a couple of times, my intact hand taut, and I resisted the urge to scratch my eye. It was torture. I couldn't risk pushing debris into it that could impact my vision. Opening a metal drawer, I took out a piece of cloth and wiped the grime from my eyes. I knew we still needed to move, but what puzzled me was how nonchalant he was. The process had made more noise than was necessary. He leaned on the wall, wrapped his arms around his body, and bent over. Watching him, I wondered why. My severed wrist barely hurt now. I lifted it up before wrapping it up, and noticed he was watching me once I was done. He had sad grey eyes through the fogged-up visor, and slowly slumped to the floor. I pointed to the door leading further into the tunnels, hoping he would understand, and it would take us time to get there. He shook his head. If only I had a piece of paper and a pen to write, or my damn tongue to where I could speak. Perhaps he was worried? I pointed, then mimicked a zombie's snarling face and shook my head, hoping he wouldn't think there was a horde of the undead waiting down there for him.
No, it's no use.
The commander paused, offering up an appreciative, yet sad smile that didn't reach his eyes. He unclasped the strap of his helmet. The material already had a rough and damaged surface. I shook my head wildly, knowing it wasn't safe for him, and rushed over to hold it down. He pushed me back, checked a meter on his device, sighed, and gently moved me away. I moved the residue between my thumb and forefinger, and it was dark and mixed with a coarse plastic material and something else. I lifted it to my nostrils to smell it, then wiped it off with some stray pieces of paper. I noticed he was staring at me, seemingly in concern.
Fuck. Only half was sent through.
He slumped in defeat. There was still a chance, but retrieval of the items and data would take time.
I need to get to the radio tower. Do you know where it is?
I nodded eagerly. I held up my stump while mimicking a missile flying into it, followed by a large explosion. My free hand's fingers flared wide to demonstrate. The impact had destroyed half of it, causing radio frequencies to have difficulties, which is why I had to go to the very edge of town. He let out a dismissive scoff, smirked, and his limbs went limp, relaxing while he closed his eyes to gain a moment of peace in the chaos. After barely a second, he let out a loud, coarse laugh that shook his entire body.
I knew we wouldn't make it back out. There wasn't enough supplies. One way in, transfer the information, and then we were supposed to die here.
He confessed, staring off into nothingness. I wondered what was going through his mind. Regret? A longing for the future? His eyes blinked slowly. Tears pricked at his eyes, and I felt like I was listening to his deathbed confession, and he wished to meet his maker, unburdened by the secret.
I knew. Neither of them knew the truth. I doubted they would have come. So many had already died trying to reach the town. They were told there was a cache of goods here.
I had the feeling his mind wished for the pain to end, yet his body wanted nothing more than survival. I gestured hastily for him to follow me, and to my surprise, he did. We moved down the tunnel. The deeper underground we went, the quieter and safer it was. What I didn't reasonably expect was the wildlife that had survived in the underground world of the town. A small family of rats had made their home, and scurried away when they saw the light and movement. I heard nocturnal birds and bats flying to avoid us, their wings swooping and echoing throughout the tunnel. Perhaps in larger cities with underground metros, people would have survived better. Moving through the long service tunnels until we reached a room, marked with staff only at the door, and it wasn't as faded as the damaged paintwork outside. Opening the door with a creak. There were a couple of old desks on one side, with 2 matching office chairs, all coated in a layer of dust. They acted as a barricade, with dried blood coating them, the corpses having been dragged off a long time ago. There were boxes of old food and medical supplies on the desks. He held a device in his hand. I guessed it served as a many-purpose device, measuring oxygen, toxins, etc. He held it close to his visor, then reaching behind him, and he turned a valve on his oxygen tank and lifted his helmet off with a loud gasp. It was dropped on the ground, momentarily discarded. The stale sweat clinging to his hair told me he had worn this same suit for a considerable amount of time. His skin unable to breathe, and discomfort preferred in the case of survival. I figured it must have been safe, or he wouldn't have done it. His hair was cropped back, and now with a better look at him, I could see the sickness that was claiming him. His skin was graying. His eyes had dark bags underneath them, and his cheeks were gaunt. He coughed up black blood and looked at it feebly in his hand. I reached out to take his helmet and stared at my reflection again. I could see why they thought I was one of the undead. I no longer resembled a human. I barely felt like one. A small cut on my forehead remained, the wound unchanged, not getting worse yet not healing either.
If only,
he said, checking the signal of the scanner. The battery bar remained steady, while the signal would flicker between reconnecting, sending pieces of data before it would disconnect.
Come on, come on.
The frustrated growl, and his hand tensed, resisting the urge to throw it. I wished I could have asked him about the outside world. How many people were alive? What happened? My memories were scattered. I stood, opened the drawers, and found an old magazine. The products and cheesy smiling faces of the models now felt redundant. I found a piece of paper and a pen with depleted ink, searching through it until finally, finding a pencil, I was able to scribble my thoughts. Since I was a child, when the world changed, I never got a chance to learn how to read or write. Thus, had to rely on my drawing skills. I drew a circle inside the stick figures of us and the ruins of the town, and using the pencil, I drew an arrow pointing to the outside. I handed it to him with a smile. He stared up at me, wrinkling his nose, and took it in his hand. He stared at the piece of paper. He studied it, looked at me, and scrunched it up with his hand and tossed it aside. My fist clenched, and I had to resist the urge to strike him. I was trying to show him a way out, a way he could survive, perhaps with guilt, or wishing to confess his final moments. He pressed what I'm guessing was a recording device. The button clicked.
Commander Bronson of the Zelta Expedition Team. After the information was retrieved, Dr. Robinson's notes were mostly intact and carried by.
Bronson's sideward glance made my shoulders slump.
The target girl they met, the immune one without a tongue, she appears to be dead.
There was a moment of silence, with only distant wind and the aches of metal surrounding us.
If we were aware of any survivors, we would have allocated for them. She is undead, but has shown no hostility. Seer and Varus have both turned. I don't know their current status, but I had to run. I'm currently under the town inside a maintenance tunnel.
Bronson paused. A slow, lingering death was worse than a swift one with direct purpose. He coughed, and inside the congealed blood were thick, fleshy chunks with small larvae wriggling inside the entrails. A trail of it clung to his lips, and I had nothing safe to wipe his mouth with. Leaning on the wall, he stared up at the ceiling, with black mold nestled in the corner. Now a laughable health hazard if he managed to survive.
There are 3 known surviving human megacities. At least, when we set off 6 months ago. One underground somewhere near Tokyo. One in Perth, Australia, and another underground in Detroit.
He chuckled, sputtering on a thickening piece of bloody saliva, thinking of home, and I recognized his accent.
Who would have thought Detroit would have one of the places where people wanted to go? All the empty farmland allowed a chance to build without the undead lurking around. There were smaller groups, towns that tried to make a last stand. Bandits, and trying to maintain law and order has been difficult.
Bronson paused, clutching his stomach, and groaned slowly. His teeth taunt together and winced.
For all I know, they could be gone.
I sat staring, imagining what it could have looked like. Crammed with survivors, and the constant threat of death approaching.
We were given the RG2A and secondary vaccines. All the soldiers were given them. Round the clock, they were created in a lab for the general population. There wasn't enough for everyone. We had to select who was worthwhile, and who was to be tested on.
Bronson didn't explain what that meant.
If this gets to the right people, we have a chance.
He exhaled, a death rattle creeping up on him, aware that death was approaching. Soon. I didn't know what he wanted, nor how to help the situation.
Now, all I can do is hope she will do this.
He stared at me, his eyes becoming lifeless pools, and soon, Bronson was gone. A wriggling under his skin warned me of what would come. Perhaps it mutated, twisting the undead into something much more terrifying. I slipped the pencil through his temple to prevent any possibility of him rising again. Without a purpose, I sat pondering my next decision. A promise made now felt numb, and perhaps this was the last. A series of monstrous shrieks sounded through the tunnels. He tried to rise, summoned by their call, and instead of following me, he moved towards them, blocking their path. I ran, though hearing him torn and devoured by many mouths on their body. I didn't want to look, yet the sounds, they chilled me to the bone. A low, rumbling laughter echoed through the tunnel, and their rapid footsteps told me they were approaching. The 2 scientists hobbled toward me with their skulls still cracked open, drawn forward with an instinctive knowing. What struck me was how they feasted on the dead. I saw Lawson's dog tag dangling feebly from the stomach mouth of one of the shambling undead scientists, who draw more of their ordinary kind to them, only to feast on them, with cracking bone and mauled flesh. Reaching the ladder to the manhole, I climbed up it. While unable to speak, their hostile eyes down below could be felt. I was angry that even in death, Lawson, Worthington, and the others were harmed. They were the closest thing I had to family, friends, in this twisted, broken world. I ran, sprinting as fast as I could, and stared up at the large structure. After circling the tower, I made my way inside and searched for a way up. I found stairs used to reach the higher levels of the abandoned building. Finding a maintenance ladder, I climbed up the roof, only to see one of the undead, their legs missing and practically fused to the concrete. It eyed me up, a shrill cry from down below, and it screamed, desperately reaching out for me. I climbed the high tower, wrapping my stump around it, using my legs to push my body up, and ignoring the feel of my skin peeling off. While there was no pain, the knowing I was being skinned was a terrifying one. All of this in humanity's final hope. I keep my promise to them all. My hand was frozen. It was difficult to move, and gritting my teeth together, I soon realized they were fused. The remnants of my hair stuck together, and my shirt was rotting away from my body, soon falling off, and strips of skin floated away. It beeped. The transmission was working. The upload was successful. 100%. I could barely see now. My eyes were freezing, and my sight was fogging over. Only the metal bars visible, before they were a shadowy memory. It was no longer my concern. All I could do was hope there was someone there to listen and take it all in. I'd send this message to them, and I'd speak for the last time, frozen yet alive. I remained there, waiting for the day I'd be found, hoping they'd realize my blood is a biohazard. They left me to perish, and that would be the best possible outcome. There was a chance in the darkness of night I'd be able to slip away unnoticed. A distant howl warned me that coyotes were lurking about, ready to pick the bones of the dead and dying. Their yellow eyes peered out, circling and waiting for the living to leave, all ready to sink their teeth into us. I saw at least 12 separate pairs of them. I didn't know what was worse, to be eaten alive, or to become the plaything of a raider. I saw what happened to those they claimed as their property, intimately close. I lay in the dirt in a puddle of my friend's still warm blood, forced to lay in it while it coated my lips, and I tried not to taste the metallic liquid. A large open wound on their throat, while the remaining blood gurgled out, whilst I avoided looking into his cold, lifeless eyes. Still open and in shock, this had occurred to him. I remembered how we tried to protect each other, but they had come from all sides during the night, the road having many places to strike from, both from behind, and soon we were overwhelmed. Once panic set in, they made short work of the caravan company that had become my home away from home. It didn't take long until we were all cut down. The raiders moved from body to body, stealing weapons and looting whatever valuables we still had. They stripped the bodies of clothing, boots, and any valuables they could use. They laughed loudly, bellowing into the night, enjoying taking the hard-earned rewards for themselves. Pure plunder. I lay limp, ignoring one while they copped a feel of one of my breasts, whilst in the process of looting my body. A necklace pulled from my neck, my money stolen, and all that remained was a knife hidden under the corpse of a colleague. My firearms had already been taken from my dead hands. Without a clear shot, it was pointless to shoot. For a moment, I thought one of them realized I was still alive. He stared down at me, kicked my leg, and waited, as though looking for a reaction. I allowed my body to go limp, moving with the motion, only to have him kick me harder. Resisting the urge to wince, he sought out better entertainment than me. I had to slow my breathing down to conceal it. Between it and my rapidly beating heart, I was uncertain whether or not I'd survive. They weren't interested in taking slaves this time, or prisoners to ransom for coin and supplies. Drunk with victory and high from stimulants, two of them embraced each other, kissing, before falling into the blood and gore to complete their amorous union. She wiped blood from her bare chest, rubbing it down her body before sucking it off her fingers and offering it to her lover, who eagerly lapped it all up. My fist clenched, looking away and waiting for that precious chance to leave, allowing my mind to leave my body. I'm laying limp. Better that they not realize I was still alive, close enough for concern. Fires and metal drums were lit, with a leg cut from a slain companion, draped over the barrel to cook it. The aroma of sizzling flesh filled my nostrils, and I had been proven wrong. A fight had broken out among them, fighting over the prime pick of the spoils, only for the leader to stake his claim. As far as I know, I was the sole survivor. Fortunately for me, another raider gang, the Bone something or other, heard the noise, and with wolf-like howls, they ran out of the darkness and came to pick off their rivals. It was a fool's errand trying to keep up with them all. They slaughtered, absorbed, or joined each other constantly. However, the brutality was always the same. They fired from the open areas and ran over with their baseball bats and machetes. I couldn't tell how many there were. There were screams and gunfire coming from the edge, and the raider who had been looting closest to me was shot in the shoulder. She clutched her injury before she was struck down with a machete. She reached up to try to stop it, only for strike after strike to come down on her head. The crack of bone rang out. Her arm flailed with every motion, and soon she too was deceased. Her body dropped lifelessly before me, her arm draped over my torso, and still I had to wait. In the chaos I watched for an opportunity, and I hoped to see them someday, solely for the hope of revenge. I lay in silence, only when they were too focused on each other to notice me. Crawling on my elbows, I dragged myself away from the carnage and hid behind a large boulder to conceal myself. My left forearm was injured. Pressing on it, I tried to stop the bleeding, and I didn't bother waiting to see which faction would win. I turned and made my way, risking my fate with the coyotes. Fortunately, I wasn't left with nothing. The distractions had proven to be beneficial. My clothing, my trusted water canister, and knife were all I had. A chorus of coyotes' sharp barking howls emitted around me, causing me to hold up my knife, ready to strike down. A pack of them circled around me, snapping their teeth at me, trying to gauge any weakness. My fingers ached. Blood loss took its toll on me, and soon I was on the ground with fangs close to my face. I heard a sharp crack, reaching for my knife before it was taken from me, and soon the grogginess claimed me. Waking up, my vision blurred, and realizing I was still alive, I jumped up, sought out a weapon immediately, and was ready to fight. My gaze darted around for any enemy to defend myself, only to discover that I was safe and alone. My breath was rapid, and my body ached, and I stood, rubbing my limbs to bring feeling back to them. My unknown benefactor now long gone. The sun's rays came through the semi-boarded-up window, looking around the quaint shack, just in case they were hiding themselves somewhere, lurking just out of reach. There was a single mattress, an old wooden chair pointed in its direction, with a rusted old bucket filled with sad, sickly-looking produce. Whoever they were, they tried to make it look like a comfortable home. An old torn rug on the floor, a painting with a questionable red stain on it, no doubt a hint of what had happened to the previous occupants, and a bedside table with a vase of a dreary, plastic flower gave it a loosely homely feel. I found a handwritten note on the coffee table, with stab marks, and smeared with gunpowder. It read as follows:
"You'll never see me in person. Take what you need and heal up, then set out on your way. Be gone by morning, or you won't like what happens."
No greeting nor any name given. It wasn't clear when the letter was written, or how much time I had left. I didn't want to wait to see what they meant. My wound on my shoulder ached, but it was patched up. Putting my nose close to it and giving it a sniff, it wasn't infected, and had been disinfected. The aroma of the antiseptic, with a small bottle of alcohol and clean bandages were left behind, and it made me increasingly suspicious of the person's intentions. No one did anything out of the goodness of their hearts. My clothes too were also changed. Instead of the traveling clothes with minimal leather armor, I wore a pair of weathered jeans with a loose plaid shirt with a reddish-brown stain on it. It had a circular piece of stitchwork, no doubt from a bullet wound. After a quick sniff, I realized they too were cleaned. Standing up, I looked outside and saw the road I'd been traveling on with my now deceased caravan. In the morning light, it looked peaceful, happy. Ignoring the pain that riddled that road, the cabin was hidden, concealed by 2 dry shrubs that had seen better days. Tucked up on a mountain, it would have been the perfect vantage point for defense, or to launch attacks on people traveling along the road. My grams always told me to pay my debts. Unfortunately, I didn't have anything to offer. A bottle of water and a tin of canned meat were left out for me. Opening the bottle, I sniffed the water and guessed it was fresh. There was always a risk of poison, but why go through so much effort to keep me alive? I polished it all off, pocketing the can for later on, despite how hungry I was. I opened up the cupboards for some sign of whose place I was in. Finding nothing exciting or identifying, I stopped. Looking out at the red horizon, I saw the sun was in the middle of the sky, and realized I had overslept. The phrase, "take what you need," meant I was more than willing to fill my pockets with whatever I wanted. I looked around for a hidden compartment behind the painting. Finding it, it creaked open, and I found the space mostly empty, except for a pistol, some ammo, and a machete. I took the machete and a rather beaten up pistol Not great, but it would do in a pinch. Carefully, I opened the door, ready for traps, and leapt backward, only to receive quiet in response. Feeling silly, yet alive. Using my leg to hold open the door instead this time, and jolted through. Out into the wastes. A stray tumbleweed rolled past me, and instantly I felt the sun's burn on my skin. Normally, I never would have ventured out during the harsh midday sun. However, the raiders were likely sleeping or resting their wounds. Traveling alone on the road was foolish, yet I had no choice. Each of the local towns were too far away to make it with my meager supplies. However, now I had a better chance of survival. Looking back at the building that served as my unofficial temporary home, I made my way to one of the local pit stops, at a crossroads of the main trading routes. A rusted sign hung, with arrows in all directions. A couple of rusty shacks now looked luxurious, with the promise of food, water, and shelter. I made my way down. People wandered around, with different caravans moving through, the larger ones having the best mercenaries trailing them. Most of them I could trust if I was in a tight spot. It was reassuring to be amongst familiar people. I figured I'd have to break the news, getting in contact with someone who would give out the updates to the right people, and this was the perfect place. The aroma of food brought me to the right person. "Hey, Val, you won't believe the days I've been having," I said. Her back was facing me. She was breathing heavily and tending to the cooker in front of her. The food cooking smelled delicious. Despite already having food, I needed that for the road. And besides, people were always friendlier when you had something to offer. Sitting on a stool at a bar that had seen better days. An old drunk beside me fell asleep, his forehead resting on its surface. My fingers tapped on the table. Finally, I could unleash my chattiness on someone. My caravan was attacked, all dead as far as I know, except for me. Hey, do you know any good Samaritans? Someone pulled me out of a death pile Oh. She turned to face me. Her left eye and nose had been sliced off, leaving only a stump. It was a ruddy pink, fading as the wound was turning to scar tissue. Her lips partially open, and I now knew why she was breathing so intensely. Her remaining eye was sunken in, ringed with dark shadows, and a coldness, showing a weariness I didn't expect from her. That said, scars and wounds weren't strange on the road. What will it be? With no explanation about what happened, following her lead, lizard meat, cheese, maybe some chilies if you have any, on a wrap, I answered, exchanging some of the coin I'd been given by my generous, unknown benefactor. "So what happened, Tori?" she asked, her back to me while she prepared my food. We were heading down the old North Road, heading toward Lawson, and we were attacked by raiders. Not sure what group. I didn't recognize their colors. Didn't really get a chance to speak either, I said, giving a nod of thanks, while she placed my food in front of me. They never skimmed here, always giving good portions, nice and fresh. After blowing on it, I took a bite. "They took us all. Wiped out. We were attacked by another group of the bloody raiders. Didn't see them either. The bodies will be on the road still, unless they've been quick clean." I was surprised she didn't mention it to me, but I figured she wanted to find out on her own. I'll let everyone know. Terrible shame. Yeah, I answered, in between mouthfuls of food, my fingers covered in the grease. Say, how'd you survive? She asked, the remnant of an eyebrow raised in curiosity while she cleaned a tumbler. See, that's what I don't get. Someone knocked me out. I woke up in an abandoned shack that looked real fancy. They left a note telling me I'd be gone before they were. Her top lip curled skeptically. Nobody does anything for free. I know. No marks, no changes, nothing. I got an off feeling from her now. Perhaps it was mutual. I decided it was best not to mention how they patched up my wounds too. Do you know anyone who could have done it or lives around the hills around the road? After a long pause, that damn tumbler never received so much polishing. A long, steady stare of a skilled deceiver greeted me. Not your business if I do. Your news is your own, theirs is theirs. Privacy. I knew all sorts passed through here, and they likely were happy to take anyone's coin, even if it was blood money from raiders, slavers, or any other unsavory types of people. Fair enough, I conceded, putting a hand up before taking more mouthfuls, and noticed the old-timer hadn't moved. He stopped snoring. Looking around, I noticed there weren't a lot of people. Usually by now I'd see multiple caravanners, travelers, merchants, and others making the journey between different towns. At these crossroads, it would have been busy. Looking around more, I noticed some of the stalls were vacant, and their wares no longer there. None here would have hesitated to make a sale, or deny the opportunity to earn some cash. Hey, Val? What's happening? I turned back to see the barrel of a weathered pistol aimed at my face. Eyes wide, I put my hands up to show I was unarmed. Which was a lie. I'm sorry. Gotta do this to you. It's me or you. Get up. She responded, gestured for me to step aside, and at such close range, I knew running would still run the risk of being shot. I stood, stepped backward, and realized the old man was dead. The vacant stare in his eyes, gazing out at the world. His drink spilled, wetting his beard, and his arm dropped limp at his side. Blood pooled inside them, leaking from them, and I recognized it as being poison. It'd be cruel to do this to him. Keep walking. Hands up, no funny business. Okay, I kept my hands up. I didn't need to turn around. I could sense the gun aimed at the back of my head. A tingling sensation. And I walked, realizing I was being herded to the back of the sheds that served as bunks for people traveling through. I hadn't looked back here for some time now. There was an iron cage filled with people. I saw some of their regular customers, along with strangers, victims chosen at random on the road. What the fuck? I whispered, instinctively stopping when I got too close, and she smacked me with the pistol. I said keep moving. Why? Why do this? The answer was likely simple. Coin. Thus, that was what I wanted to appeal to. These are your customers. When I noticed two others who had been part of the tiny community. Grant. A giant bear of a man who managed the bar and was missing his ears. His beard had been shorn off, leaving bloody scabs on his face. The other was one of the merchants. I don't remember his name. The latter was physically strong, capable of driving even the most rugged of wanderers away if the need arose. Neither, I'd say, would be an easy target. Who, or rather, which group could have done something like this? With my hands up, I felt the knife and machete removed from their scabbards. My pockets made light, and they even lifted me up to remove my boots. Wait, who did this? Why are you doing this? Get in, Val insisted, her voice weary, and I was shoved inside with the others. The door crashed and locked behind me, leaving me with the other captives who didn't meet my gaze. Val, I pleaded, a hand reached through to her. A weary face greeted me, water in her remaining eye, and it looked like she wanted to say something before she left. I watched her walk away. Hey! 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 Last person who did that got their tongue cut out. A low growl warned me from the corner. Not looking at me, I saw they were a soldier, or perhaps looted the corpse of one. Her back rested on the side of the cage, a leg extended. Otherwise, other people concealed her from view. Instantly, I shut up. We were given water in a trough. They ignored us when we questioned them when they came close. And being forced to stay trapped in the sun was a nightmare. Our skin burned. And one of the boys took pity on us and put up an awning to help us. Barely a little. He didn't look at us before running off to his parents. My stomach growled, other than adding more unfortunate souls to our ranks. We never saw them anymore. The same cage had a sickening aroma now. People unable to leave were forced to relieve themselves here among the others. One spot at the end reserved for people wishing to do their business. I expected a large group to come for us, but instead, it was a polite, almost reserved-looking individual with a fine dress. She carried a parasol to protect herself from the sun, her lips painted red, and sandy-colored hair curled into a bob, framing her face. She regarded us, a skilled eye, examining us, a lit cigarette between her fingertips hanging to one side, a hand on one hip, resting there, and she wore a clean knee-length dress. It was stark white. She stood alongside Val and Grant, who both stood behind her. Physically, they could have easily overpowered her, yet mentally she took control. Not the best possible stock. They look sickly. Bad condition. She mused to herself. On the breeze, I could smell the faint aroma of her perfume. She didn't comment on ours, avoiding looking at her to conceal my embarrassment. We'll take them. And the contract continues. Please. This sapping into our business. They're our regular customers, Val pleaded. This is the price you pay for failure to agree to the necessary terms, she answered. I couldn't see their faces anymore, yet their lowered heads and drow pace gave the impression they were broken. I didn't know how she managed to arrive here. Her footwear was certainly not designed for the long treks, and there wasn't a single sign of damage to them. My gaze met hers, and there was no light in them. Cold, methodical, and her top lip curled in irritation. Pure contempt. She left without another word. The other two trailed behind her. The nighttime was uneventful, other than a group of hungry, feral dogs that got too close for my liking. There were no more issues. Come morning, a group of 5 men approached the cage, with a long iron chain passing between them. The cage door opened, and the captives no longer had strength in their bodies. We were dragged out, thrown on the ground, and the shackles were placed around our ankles, locked tight. Either we stood up, or were dragged, as we were forced to follow. They didn't look at us. The sun bore down heavily on us. The intense heat of the open road burnt our skin, and most dragged our feet. We were simply too weak to fight back or try to run away. Simply moving from one rest stop to another, we walked past different caravans who didn't even look at us. Hell, even some offered cordial greetings to the guards, and we received assistance from none. Who would risk a gunfight to rescue people they didn't know? One of the older people who'd been locked inside the cage, the longest, fell to the ground. They were dragged for a couple of steps before everyone stopped. We can't keep going. They'll die, I gasped. They may not care about us as people, but would they ruin their investment? Finally making eye contact with one, my lips were cracked and swollen. Thick saliva made it difficult to swallow. He had a gaiter covering his mouth and nose, concealing and protecting the lower part of his face, and a muffled reply answered me. Good. The weak ones are the first to go. I couldn't see his eyes under the visor, and for a moment, I thought I recognized his voice. The prisoner's limbs were cut away at the ankles, and only a faint yelp told us he still lived. His corpse was thrown down the side of the road, discarded. We were forced to walk through the terrain, away from the roads, and I recognized the lead-ups. I'd been on this road before, knew Victory didn't take kindly to slavers, and would have happily killed them all. The uneven terrain, heat, and lack of nourishment caused our muscles to seize up. Thankfully, by this point, I was no longer thirsty nor hungry. We flopped down on the ground in a heap together, panting and greedily accepting the water we were given. 2 died under the strain during the night, while we were still bound together with only a meter length of chain. We now had space to move our bodies. The guards sat by themselves with a campfire while depriving us of some of the warmth, while devastatingly hot during the day. It was unbearably cold at night. We shivered and huddled together, bonded over our position. When morning came, 2 were dead, having died during the night. I couldn't tell the reason why. After we were thankfully given some water, and this time, some coarse bread to eat, and I nearly choked when I coughed it all up. It was rotten, but unsure when we'd eat again. I consumed it all for the energy. The days all blurred into one. Every step I could feel my body becoming weaker, and I regretted not running when Val first pulled her gun on me. Death would have been better than this. The others perished, and it was no longer shocking, just how it was. I wanted to refuse water, to let death claim me, and to die. Yet whenever it was offered, I would grasp it, swallowing it down until I could claim no more. It was when we were resting for yet another night. I no longer recognized the landscape around me. The roads nor the signs gave any indication of familiarity. Seeing those I was chained with, I couldn't look like them. They were walking corpses, on the brink of death, our clothing hanging off our bodies, and we were filthy, staring out at the world with vacant eyes, shadows of our former selves. I thought some of the different raider groups would have attacked us, yet instead, they gave us a wide berth. I could have sworn I saw a lone figure in the distance. The sandstorm made it difficult to see and focus, but I was sure whoever it was, they were really there. A swirl of sand, and they were gone. I didn't think wherever we were actually existed. I'd heard of this place, yet never believed it was genuinely real. We were led through the gates of Atora, a city that stood in the desert, supplied by a natural and apparent endless spring of water. There were pools of it, with wells showing signs of natural springs. Water, for me, had always come by rain, and was a precious resource you'd share with only those of value. We could smell the water, feeling it on our faces, and we were taken down into a small valley, protected from the worst of the Wasteland's harsh weather. It was shaded by the mountains that cast a shadow down below, and the streets were completely deserted. We walked past empty storefronts with their goods still outside. With no concern about theft, I saw weapons, food, and other valuables, all items that would tempt someone with slippery fingers. Just left out in the open. We were taken inside a room with 5 beds, one for each of our number, loose drawstring clothing on top, and a wooden tub filled with water in the middle. After we were locked inside, I noticed a different door across the way and realized there were 2 entrances. We were unchained and now residing inside civilization. We walked around the empty and cool room in dazed awe. I ran my fingertips along the stone wall to realize it was reality and not merely a dream. The room was carved into the mountain itself. The 4 others. I didn't hear their names, nor did I ask about them. They also dawdled around the room. Unwilling to let it pass by, I stripped off and used the water to clean the grime from my body, gradually feeling more human, and soon the others joined me. Once clean, I dressed in the loose tunic and drawstring leggings. Sitting on the bed, it felt strange to be back on one once more, and I lay down, aiming to rest for barely a moment. I woke to the smell of hot food. Wooden bowls of thin soup with coarse bread provided, seemingly out of nowhere. Instantly I got up and ate. Sure, it could have been poisoned or tampered with in some way, yet hunger drove us forward. Now with renewed nutrition, I tested the door and tried to push it open, only to find it had been locked. There was a solitary window that looked into a small courtyard filled with greenery, desert flowers that bloomed and were tended to. Myself and the other captives still did not bother to learn about each other. Soon 3 of them blinked, twitched, and curled up into small huddled masses. No doubt whatever was in their food caused their deaths. The other survivor and I stared at each other, as though waiting for the other to suddenly drop to the ground. Except it didn't happen. Why is this happening to us? Why go through all this trouble? I asked him, a younger boy in his late teens, who responded with an unknowing shrug, and the door creaked open, with no visible person entering. We looked at each other in confusion. Then barefoot, I walked toward it, and peeked out the long semi-dark corridor, barely lit. I knew we were expected to walk down it. Stay here. I'll see what is out there, I said, stepping outside, and hissed when a sharp, sudden cold greeted me. I took 2 steps, listening for any signs of people when the door slammed shut by an unseen force behind me. I heard his frantic screams. He hit the door, and then the walls with his fists, striking them, all in an attempt to escape. I couldn't see what was happening. On the opposite side, I too struck the door, until it dawned on me that the screaming had finally stopped. I realized death must have claimed him. My hand lowered, and stepping back from the door, I was the last. Making my way down the long corridor, I saw a door at the end. I figured this was part of a game of theirs, that I would be their final piece of sport. Rage and adrenaline spiked throughout my body. My fists clenched and trembled, opening the door at the end, barely a crack, to peep inside, to see an empty room. I opened it completely, and saw a group of people standing there in a semicircle. Healthy, clean, tall, all rarities from my part of the world. They wore loose clothing similar to what I was wearing. and my eyes darted around, waiting for someone to strike. They clapped, smiling, and a well-dressed woman stepped forward, her face tattooed in semicircles, as was her chest and arms. Some of them were numbers and symbols I didn't recognize. Welcome and congratulations. Your new life is about to begin. She unveiled her hand to me. I hesitantly took it in mine. There were no blemishes, nor signs of coarseness. It was perfectly soft in harsh contrast. Not that she showed any signs of hesitation. I was nearly too stunned to speak. Where am I? With the grandchildren of Artoria. I didn't have time to run. I heard them laugh and rummage through my family's possessions. They were drunk and made short work of the guards of my settlement when they were changing for the night shift. We had a mix of chain-link fences, lined with wooden paneling and metal sheets. They had gotten past the gate and entered inside the former gas station and motel. They had been kicking open doors and attacking people sleeping in their beds, dragging the terrified survivors out into the large driveway. It had been many months since our last attack, and a successful alliance had made us grow lazy. Since my room was closer to the back, I heard the noise and knew what was happening. If only I could reach safety. The back entrance had been barricaded when we first took the place over, one way in and one way out. The only other option was the armory, a room chosen to store the weapons. My heart raced. I could hear the screams and pleas of Sarah and Tia, two of the local girls. Maria, my childhood best friend, and I made our way. Already the raiders had started to loot the armory, 4 of them standing guard. I watched from around the corner. They knew all the weaknesses of our settlement, and must have been here before. It was hopeless. I shook my head at her. We went to try to find somewhere to hide. I found my father's revolver discarded on the floor. Picking it up, and I opened the cylinder and saw 5 bullets inside. 1 was missing, and I guess it had been fired already. We hurried toward the front, trying our best to stay quiet. We were breathing heavily, and I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. 2 people were dragged out of their room by 5 raiders, carrying rifles and other weapons, and pushed them out of the door into the open driveway. We couldn't do anything to stop it. I held my revolver in my hand. I had to use the remaining bullets sparingly. It was incredibly loud, the screaming, bullets being fired, and outside, I could have sworn I heard a bonfire being lit, with items from my community being thrown on top, adding fuel to the fire. Using items from my home, I sat with my back against the cold, hard concrete, with tears trickling down my face, Maria's hand in mine. We looked at each other, and she rummaged around for something to use as a weapon. They kept coming around the corridors, lifting up tables, and destroying anything they didn't take with them, throwing the general household items on the floor. The moment I could, I took Maria with me, and the pair of us hid, her inside a metal locker, and me inside the crawl space. I couldn't do anything to stop them. I recognized screams from other people in my community, and the helplessness gripped my soul. I peeked through the gap. One of the raiders came too close, and I fired 2 shots at his chest. He rested his hand on it, coughed up blood, and fell backward, dead. Maria got out and dragged him away, ignoring my hushed warnings for her to hide. I checked my revolver. Only 3 bullets left, and not enough to break through using gunfire. I debated using one on myself. I stared down at it, taking in the highlights of the metal to ignore how I felt, fingertips caressing the hard surface, and I knew I wouldn't be able to stay here long. I heard the locker door close, and we waited for what felt like forever. Footsteps of 2 people could be heard. I hid further in the wall, squeezing in while waiting for them to leave.
I think we got all of them.
The gruff voice came, and the pair stopped near me. I could see the outline of their legs. With the 3 bullets, I could have done some damage.
Yeah, better check. You remember what happened last time.
A second. I guess he was younger. I couldn't tell where they were from.
Yeah, and?
The faint sobbing grew louder, and I feared for her. I covered my mouth to keep the sound inside. The metal locker door was yanked open, exposing the person hiding inside. Maria. She too had been crying, with tear stains down her cheeks, and the bandit reached in to grab her by the hair. She punched him twice in the face. I heard a sharp crack and an angry scream.
Fucking bitch,
the elder growled, before slamming her into the wall 3 times, causing her to black out, breaking her nose with a loud crack.
I knew there was one. We'd better take her out with the rest.
He hung her over his shoulder and carried her out to the rest of the main group. Her dark hair hung downward, now coiled together from all the blood.
You've got a good ear. Can you hear any others?
No. I wish we didn't have to do this with every raid.
The voice lowered and stepped closer to whisper.
Hey, shut up. Don't let me or anyone else hear you talk like that again.
He warned, and the pair left to go back to the main group. I looked back out again, regretting not doing anything to help her. I stared out at the old car park, where they had set up shop organizing the loot, living and otherwise. I heard people begging and pleading with their captors.
Kill anyone who tries to escape.
He roared, then added maliciously.
I don't want any survivors warning them of our arrival.
I saw who I assumed was the leader, black-bearded, and with a thick scar down his right cheek. We heard talk of different raider clans. Most tended to leave us alone because of our alliances. I could only see his face, rather than those forced to kneel in front of him. He had pale grey eyes, and regarded them neutrally, compared to the hostile nature of his men. It was unsettling. He turned his head to speak to the 2 who were close by. He pointed to put Maria with the other prisoners. I wanted to hear more of what he was saying. Squeezing through the hole in the wall, I moved to the side with my revolver ready. I had never been a particularly good shot, crawling on my hands and knees, peering through a crack in the doorway to see a group of raiders. They had decorated and cut their bodies with distinctive markings. I couldn't recognize which of the many raider clans this was. Regularly, one group would dominate another, absorbing the other into their raider clan. They had 3 red stripes on either cheek. Their clothing and armor was looted from the fallen, pieced together as bloody trophies. I saw a couple of them with guns in their hands. While they were common enough, ammunition was becoming increasingly rare, since the factories were being taken over by one of the more prominent gangs. I saw members of my community divided into 4 groups. One was for captives they intended to keep for themselves, and another was for slaves, I'm guessing to sell at the black market. Even now, law tried and failed to persist. Even in the apocalypse, most groups hadn't declined that much. Not yet. The 3rd group was too injured, or old, those who wouldn't be able to handle a lot of work. And the final group. I don't know why they were chosen. None of them had any special skills, or were particularly strong or good-looking.
String 'em up. We need more blood for the message.
He commanded, frightfully cold rather than angry. I tried to see if my parents were among the captives. Hopefully they escaped rather than be taken. The others let out an enthusiastic roar of approval, drunk and filled with battle lust in comparison to their leader. Each of them, Sarah and Tia, were roughly grabbed, stripped of their clothing, and hung from the wrists. Their bodies dangled from up high. They kicked out with their legs and all were screaming. The leader stood, taking a knife in his hand and stabbing it into the chest of Stephen, the gardener. I talked to him this morning. Slowly it was sliced through his flesh, and I heard the tearing of skin. I closed my eyes, trying to keep the sound out, and heard the voice through all the suffering.
Take whoever you want. Kill the others.
He ordered, seemingly disinterested in comparison to the warband he had assembled. He was busy, eating and drinking while studying those around him. A woman, armed to the teeth, walked toward him and whispered something into his ear. He stood, walked off with her in a direction I couldn't see. They let out a roar, and I heard people being divided up. A fight broke out among them over one person or another. I couldn't look anymore. I crept backward, hid in the hole in the wall and waited. The only thing I could do. I tried to zone out, to think of anything other than the hell I was currently lingering in, and I still wondered whether this was real or all my imagination. Hours passed. They drank our alcohol and ate our food, gorging themselves on our stockpile. We weren't going to have enough to make it through the winter. If somehow my little community survived, their screams slowly died down to whimpers, and finally, there was nothing to be worried about. I could smell fire, the heat pressuring my skin, and the smoke built up. On the breeze was the foul aroma of burning hair, skin and flesh. I could hear coughing and faint sobbing, and covering my face I knew I had to make my way out. I didn't know if the raiders were still nearby or not. I made my way through the hallway, stepping over the bloody husk of someone I didn't recognize, and nearly slipping in the thick blood. I needed another weapon, anything I could use to defend myself. I tried to make it to the armory. However, here the flames were the hottest, and the air was more difficult to breathe. I ran outside, still holding the fabric around my mouth and nose, trying to keep the smoke out, and I made my way out into the dawn. I fell on the ground, choking, and my hands rested in blood, gore, and filth from terrified people. I leaned back, staring at it on my hands, and groaned, angry at the loss. I looked around at the fire that ripped through the structures, and since I couldn't see any survivors, I moved away and waited, torn between viewing the carnage in disbelief and trying to avoid thinking about it. Looking up at the sky, it was hard to believe my world could have been destroyed in one night. Now the flames were embers. It was safer for me to walk through the bodies, and there were too many to bury alone. Everything had been looted, including some people. Not all the bodies were there. I wanted revenge. The flayed and skinned corpses hung high, with no respect for their dignity. The predatory birds were already circling, and wanted to feast. I knew I couldn't wait long. I found a blanket to wrap around myself, a knife, a water canister, and a loaf of bread covered in blood. I put it all together, and tried to find the corpses of my family to say goodbye. There were the mutilated corpses of my friends and community. I walked around in a daze, trying to think of what to do and where to go. I walked around trying to see what was left, and pondering how best to care for the dead. A trader or someone would come by eventually. The fires and smoke would be seen. It was getting late again, and heading toward dusk, and since they hadn't come back, I was sure they were off to their next target. I screamed when a hand grabbed my leg and kicked out at them. A low, sad whimper answered me, and I lowered myself down, barely recognizing her. It was Sarah. They had cut her loose and left her alive. Her right eye dangled, her hands were covered in blood, and every finger had been broken. All that remained were twisted pieces of bone. I tried to help her stand up, unaware both her kneecaps had been broken, and her feet were missing. All that remained were bleeding stumps. I'm sorry, what do I asked, and she let out an animalistic groan of pain. Her jaw and teeth had been broken. and her tongue had been cut out, a scarred pit where it had been. She must have been cut down sometime. Why? I'm not sure. The rope still dug into her wrists. Sarah made a jabbing motion to the revolver in my hand, my father's old gun. You want me to kill you? And she nodded vigorously, sobbing. I didn't have the supplies or skill needed to help her, even if she wanted it. I couldn't do this. Please, Sarah, I pleaded with her. It was selfish of me, and I hated putting my comfort above her suffering. Either in desperation or to force me to act, she suddenly leapt at me, aiming for my throat and face with those talons of hers. I shot her in the temple. The loud sound echoed through our valley, and I held her, sobbing. My face now coated with her blood and pieces of flesh. I wiped my face, hating what I had done. I murdered her, or was it a mercy killing? I checked the others, and since a majority of them were in pieces, I figured they had already reached their demise. I couldn't wait here forever. If they were still nearby, they would have heard that single shot, leaving me with 2 bullets to defend myself. With my few possessions, I left, and looked at the amount of footprints leading off in one direction, and went in the opposite one. It was difficult to see in the near darkness, and wrapping the blanket around myself, I hid inside an abandoned car, between the back and front seats. Any sound, no matter how small, caused me to wake up, listen, and wait to see if someone was walking around. It was my first time out of my home. I woke up at dawn, hoping it had been a nightmare, until I saw the condensation on the window. Looking down at my blood-soaked hands, dried and dark, I opened the door and looked out. Birds of prey were already picking at the remains, starting with the eyes, and one of them stared at me while gobbling up a piece of human flesh. Grabbing my supplies, I picked up my bag and started on my way down the road. It was only a matter of time before scavengers would come to pick the bones of whatever they could salvage, and none of them cared enough to ensure I would be safe, and it was always easier to pick loot off a corpse than deal with a survivor. I heard a car driving up behind me and hid behind a row of derelict cars along the other side of the road. It was a dirty Jeep with a makeshift M60 mounted on the back, with a man ready to fire. I could see it was full of people, and I couldn't make out the symbol on the side. It definitely wasn't the same markings as the group who attacked. Since I couldn't tell who they were, I stayed where I was and noticed as they drove toward my old home. I debated what I should do next when I noticed them, getting out and calling for survivors rather than instantly looting. They must have been our allies. When the leader pulled down his bandana from around his face, I recognized him and came out with my hands raised. I called out to them, and fortunately they recognized me. Instantly I felt a burst of relief, and I walked over to them. They saw the blood and checked my hands and limbs for any wounds.
Are you hurt?
No.
Who did this? Did you see them?
Barely. They had 3 marks. The leader was tall and bearded. He was cold. The others did most of the work.
How long ago did this happen?
He didn't give me any time to think or ponder the questions. Not yesterday, but the day before.
Did they take prisoners?
Yes, I'm not sure how many. I obediently answered every question. One of the men must have walked through my settlement to inspect the damage. He came back and shook his head sadly, confirming what I just said. I could have told them. There was nothing left.
You're welcome to come back with us, huh? Start a new life? I'm Ray. Do you remember me? I came to trade a month ago.
He offered, stepped forward and gestured to the car with an open door. I looked at him more closely, trying to gauge his intentions, and figured I had a better chance of survival now. He had kind eyes, and didn't try to force me inside, and I felt a little safer. I hesitantly looked inside, still cautious, and finally got in the car. I closed the door. Suddenly I heard the sound of gunfire. It was loud. All the glass windows were broken and sprayed over me. I covered my head with my hands, trying to wedge myself between the front and back seats for protection. The body of the gunner on top hit the car roof and fell to the ground. There were cries of it being an ambush, and they tried to make a stand. However, the gunfire came from multiple sides. I remained hidden, with nowhere left to run, and waited, still with my hands covering my head to protect myself. I saw the same raiders who attacked my home. They circled the jeep, rifles and swords at the ready. For now they didn't see me, and focused on the remaining survivors. Some stood with their weapons drawn, aimed at Ray and his men, while others were guarding the road for any would-be rescuers. They must have come to pick off anyone who came to assist us, or any scavengers. We were surrounded, and I heard a familiar, dreadful voice.
Surrender or die.
The cold demand came.
Why? You'll kill us anyway. I know what your group does to their captives.
I heard him clear his throat and spit on the ground.
I won't ask again.
I didn't see what happened. I heard the weaponry being aimed at them, and the 3 survivors dropping their weaponry on the ground. One of the raiders glanced at their leader, who beckoned for it to be taken from them. Ray and the 2 men had their hands up and were fearful. They avoided looking up, their movements jumpy, and they didn't stand still. Only Ray did, chin raised and calm. They watched while their wounded had their throats slit. I could see the anger and helplessness in their eyes. The bodies were dumped on the ground, disposed of and discarded.
There was only enough room for one of you.
The leader said. Clearly this was false. The 3 understood his meaning, but still looked at each other in confusion, and Ray didn't move, unwilling to kill either of the 2 who came with him. I could only see him from behind. I had to do something, and since I was close, I rummaged in my bag for my revolver. I had 2 shots left. They'd butcher me, but at least he would die first. The leader gestured with his hand, and one of his men shot the captive in the right leg, just above the knee. He screamed, fell on the ground clutching his leg and writhing around.
Either 2 of you die, or all of you do.
I couldn't see the 3 turn on each other, but I heard it. The pair of them repeatedly struck the injured one with their fists, bludgeoning him to death, and taking out the weakest of their number. The attackers jokingly placed bets on who would end up surviving, and laughing about the antics. The wounded man was growing weaker, unable to hold his former comrades back, and finally, his skull cracked loudly. I hated hearing the sounds. I could have sworn I heard a muffled apology, but perhaps that was wishful thinking. Ray and the other did not say anything, neither of them looking at each other or the corpse at their feet. Both of their faces were swelling, knuckles cut, and bloody with the other man's knuckles broken. The man who greeted me was the survivor, and I saw nothing but shame on his face.
That wasn't hard, was it? There's still only one spot available. Who'll be the survivor, I wonder?
Kill us! Why do any of this?
I crawled over the broken glass, ignoring the bite of the edges, and peeked out through the car window. I had to do something. With a clear shot, I knew I had to. The driver and passenger corpses were in the process of being removed from the car. Since they hadn't noticed me yet, I wouldn't get another chance. I aimed the revolver at the leader's back, through the broken Jeep window, and fired twice. My hands were shaky. The first completely missed its target, while the other hit the leader in the shoulder. He let out a loud, angry cry. I was dragged up by my hair in the back of my shirt. My hand went out to ease the pressure, and kicked out with my legs. I was happy I managed to injure him, but I knew I would be punished. I received a sharp punch to the face, and was forced to my knees in front of him. The revolver was stolen. My hands were covered in dry and fresh blood. I couldn't tell whose blood soaked them. Probably countless people's now.
We got her. Do you want us to kill her?
The leader put his hand up and shook his head.
No. We need to make an example of her.
I knew I should have saved a bullet for myself.
It seems we have a survivor from the last raid.
He growled, reached down and tilted my chin to look up at him. He didn't appear bothered by the wound, and stood steady while one of the raiders bandaged him up. Now closer. I could see him better. His eyes were cold. No life except for a tenacious anger. If he was in pain, he didn't show me. And the stoic tolerance was troubling. I waited, frightened of what would come, trembling and fully expecting to be killed. My heart pounded in my chest. The waiting was torture, and I believe that was his intention. 2 of the men who stood with him looked sheepish, and I recognized them as those who took Maria.
I'll be speaking to you two later. Failure will not be tolerated.
A moment passed. I stole a glance at him. His eyes narrowed, and the left side of his lips flickered upwards. Unlike the others, he didn't have any weapons in his hands, and finally spoke.
Take her with us.
He gave a slow leer, and instantly I felt ill.
She'll be reunited with the survivors.
Given what happened days ago, I didn't want to join them. My items, few as they were, are stolen from me. I was bound with rope, blindfolded, and thrown in the back with another captive, Ray. Someone held me down at the back of the head and lower back. I squealed when I felt a needle being injected into my neck, the liquid being pushed inside me, and I felt my body grow limp. What was that? What did you inject me with? I drawled, and the world went hazy. I heard a door slam. The engine started, and the Jeep sped up. I could hear them talking, complaining about the broken glass.
Do you think he's going to kill us?
Nah, I hope not.
Sneaky little bitch.
He sighed.
She better not get us killed.
I figured their leader took a different mode of transport back. We were going up a mountain. The Jeep took sharp turns, and I hit the side hard. Unable to use my hands to protect myself, and I was tossed around, trying to find my balance.
Try to balance yourself.
Ray murmured, and the Jeep kept driving, and we were on the road for a considerable amount of time. My heart rate and breathing remained rapid, fearful what they're going to do to us. The only good thing was the possibility of being united with my remaining family members. Perhaps some of them had survived. I'm guessing we drove a considerable way, until it came to a sharp, sudden stop, and the door was opened. I was yanked out. My arms ached. I made to stand on my numb feet. 2 sharp smells greeted me. The thick smell of disinfectant and vinegar, and the fainter one of human suffering. We were made to walk downstairs. Perhaps a stairwell? The small room echoed loudly with our footsteps, and it felt like we were going into hell. I tripped a couple of times, due to my legs being numb from traveling, and fortunately they caught me. We were led inside a room, and the blindfolds were removed, and I blinked several times, while the blurred images of my captors became clear. We were inside a concrete room, with a desk in the background, and armed guards in each of the corners. A faded symbol of the United States on the front of the desk. I was born after it fell, and the different states split apart. I remembered my parents' lessons, and hoped for restoring the United States. But personally, I didn't think too much about it. On my right side, Ray stood looking equally exhausted, and the leader approached us. I didn't say anything, taking it all in. The manner of the leader changed, and I didn't realize he was a chameleon. He smiled warmly at us. His eyes filled with hope, and I was instantly skeptical. This time, he was dressed in a clean military uniform. The bloody war paint was gone, and he looked like a different person, with kind eyes and a warm manner about him, one I could trust and find safety in. That thought troubled me.
We're trusting you both.
The leader began, taking a deep breath, and paced back and forth in front of us, his tone and demeanor changing.
The old world failed us and its people. The educated among us would have learned about what was on offer. Simple things: food, water, sanitation, safety. Now these basics are considered luxuries.
Ray and I stole a suspicious look at each other.
I've seen many people attempt and sadly fail to bring the country back.
He looked sad, remorseful even, and his gaze met mine.
The right people are essential. Without them, a country fails. And that is why I'm offering the pair of you a place. It is an offer for redemption.
I stared at him, filthy from the road, and feeling out of place. The gore felt like it became one with my flesh. You destroyed my family, my community. I spat through clenched teeth. They might have joined if you just asked them, I snapped, and I figured that would be enough.
I see. You weren't involved in your father's decisions.
He sat, leaning back in his chair, relaxed.
I extended an invitation to join months ago, sending multiple emissaries and offerings. He refused every single time. Any settlement that refuses me, it must be eradicated. For the good of the country.
I didn't know what to think. He sounded so sincere. It was tempting to believe him.
I apologize for the personal loss. However, we must put aside our personal feelings for the greater good.
He walked up and placed a tender hand on my shoulder, oblivious to the blood and gore on it.
You'll understand someday.
My skin crawled when he said so. I looked over at Ray and then back at the leader, feeling like I was the only logical one.
What do you want us to do?
He asked, unimpressed.
You will need to go through the re-education program, and it is my sincerest wish you pass with flying colors.
Ray frowned, sucked his bottom lip and nodded in agreement. I barely knew him, and felt uncertain about what to do. I couldn't run, and had nothing to return home to.
Good luck.
The leader sat behind his desk, organizing the different pieces of paper on it, and I saw the faint outline of writing. We were let out, and I heard a voice murmuring just behind me.
Hey, just go along with it. Don't fight it. It will be easier for it.
Where are the survivors? Do you know? There was an uneasy pause.
No, they're probably dead by now.
I didn't answer.
One more thing. Don't cross the red line.
Why? The corridors were longer than I expected. I didn't see any families or children. It was mostly people in looted military gear. However, these ones looked more complete, without the raider markings, and I guess it was a disguise when they traveled outside. We were led into a large room. There were no elderly or children in there. It was a Spartan, empty space, with sleeping bags on the floor, and 4 bunk beds. Not enough for everybody in the room. A mixed group of men and women, who wore stark white clothing and no shoes. Some had a red target painted on their backs, and they eyed us curiously. We were taken into a freezing cold room. Fresh clothing offered and we bathed. I kept my eyes focused away from me. I could see the outline of the guards outside and ignored them, scrubbing my cut and bruised skin clean. The icy water bit, and my teeth chattered, my arms tight around my naked stomach. Once done, I dried and dressed myself to be let out. Hey, what's going on? I asked one of the prisoners. They ignored me and moved away as quickly as possible. A loud siren played. Red flashing lights hurt our eyes, and we followed while the rest stood at attention. Ray and I followed, standing upright behind the person in front of us.
Congratulations. Each of you have survived until the next round. Get your food and nourish yourselves with the thought of tomorrow.
The voice echoed over the loudspeaker, and we went to get our trays. A questionable mixture of gruel was slopped onto a tray by a kitchen worker who served irritation rather than love. I sat at my seat. Ray and I got separated, and I sat between 2 women who refused to look at me. I was going to grab my wooden spoon to start eating when I realized none of the others started. I held it in my hand. The sound of a loud ticking clock echoed throughout the room. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten in days, and even this questionable serving was better than nothing. I'm sure it was only minutes. It felt like hours. And finally, a loud beeping sound told us we could eat. We hurriedly ate, I don't think I tasted it, and scoffed it down my throat. We all ate in silence. The loud beat caused everyone to drop their wooden spoons. They stood up, then began walking out, all in silence. And we walked back to the sleeping quarters. We lined up again, standing at attention, and waited. There was that same damned beep. I was sure if I kept hearing it, it would drive me insane.
Congratulations. You were blessed with a meal. Remember, this privilege can be removed at any time. Go and rest. Numbers 103-203-9AH, 202-904-39FE, and 29389-228SO. Report to the officer on duty.
3 people walked out of the line and walked into a room in front of us. They didn't react. They were numb robots, expressionless and obedient. The door slammed behind them. Another beep, and they began to walk around. How do I know where I'm supposed to sleep? Did we get numbers? I don't remember. I spoke in hushed tones to Ray, the only person I knew.
I don't know. No one else is talking.
He whispered back to me, looking around and trying to hide our conversation from the guards and from the other prisoners. Why don't they say anything? They don't even talk to each other.
I don't know.
He grabbed my arm, pulled me close.
Focus on surviving. Nothing else. Slip away when you can.
Ray walked to the opposite end of the room, mingling with the other people. The beds and sleeping bags were all taken. Eventually, exhaustion took hold, and I curled up on the concrete floor. It was freezing cold. Finally, I fell into a dreamless sleep. I woke up to 4 loud beeps. I hated that sound. I groaned, rubbed my eyes, and instantly felt my bones ache. Standing up, hunched over, I walked to stand in line with the others. We were left standing. I swayed, exhausted and sore, and I wasn't the only one. 2 people fell on the concrete. No one moved to help them, and left them where they fell. One let out a long, painful wail that pierced my heart. The beep. That fucking beep.
Rise and shine. Welcome to a new day. Remember, work is good for you. It will redeem you and help you become a better person.
The false, encouraging tone was played over the loudspeaker.
Dispose of the undesirables.
The guards grabbed the fallen by their nearest limb, an arm, or a leg, or one person's hair, then dragged them out in front.
No bullets are wasted on undesirables.
The radio cut short. The guards, well versed in their trade, began crushing the prisoners' skulls on the walls. The loud cracks and the inability to do anything caused my peer to urinate in fear. Yellow water trickled down their white pants. People tried desperately not to make any sounds of fear, anger, or disgust. Some stared into space, no longer in the present moment. And finally, all that remained of them was a bloodied pulp. The guards returned to their stationary place, watching us, holding their bloodied batons in their hands. Beep. The other inmates walked back to the open area to sit. The ones who had soiled themselves were given rusty buckets and mops, expected to clean the blood in silence, while the bodies were placed on racks, their liquids leaking down onto the floor behind them. I kept watching them clean up, grateful I wasn't among them, and noticed when their task was complete, the bodies were wheeled away down that same corridor where the chosen were taken. At least their suffering was over. The work we had was meaningless. Move heavy concrete bricks from one side of the room to another, on an endless repeat, only stopping when we heard that damned beep sound. Time had no place here. It was an endless cycle of eating, cold showers, the beep, the menial work, and the occasional killing. Sometimes there was a reason. Mostly, there was none, or not, depending on some unseen whim of the raider boss. I still didn't know his name. There were no mirrors, but I could see the condition of my hands. All the fat had disappeared from them. My cuticles were bloody, my fingernails now down to the quick, and they had bruises all over them. They were purple, freezing to the touch, and I figured I resembled the rest of the numb, bordering on soulless people in here. I didn't think of them as people. I was barely one. Beep. The sound had me stand regardless of how I felt, and go stand in line. The endless repetition, the pointlessness of the work, the lack of time, all these things bore down.
Selection for fresh candidates. Good luck, everyone. Remember, your country needs you.
The voice came, and we were left waiting. I wanted to fall, even if it meant death, and I tried to remember. I knew someone here, I think. My life began inside these walls. I remembered screaming in blood from before. People in different places. Their faces and the memories were always just out of reach. Shadowed faces and hidden words. Thinking of them hurt. Beep. It was strangely relaxing now. The reassurance. And it all made sense. I leaned down, groaned, and lifted the heavy brick, holding it to take it to the other end with the others. My gaze permanently lowered, causing my neck to hunch, mindlessly avoiding bumping into each other, the sound of the large bricks echoing as they were dropped. My endless drudgery continued. Onward and onward. I carried another concrete slab, and I was close to the drop-off point.
Hey.
One of the guards whispered. I nearly didn't recognize the voice. A flashing memory of hair dangling in blood, and it disappeared, just as quickly as it came. I kept my gaze on the ground.
Hey, come this way.
He walked on the side, past the red line we were forbidden to cross, and I stared at it. Only the guards were permitted to walk through there. I didn't refuse either. I froze in place. My limbs couldn't move, and I shakily shook my head, barely making any movement.
I'm trying to help you.
He came and put his arm through mine. I didn't want to refuse him. Not that I was strong enough to. I dropped the concrete block with the others, and he walked with either of us on both sides of the line. I looked at the other prisoners. None of them noticed or changed course, mindlessly carrying on with their task. I followed him and stopped in a rising panic when I saw the door. The infamous entrance where the dead and the living would pass through.
Come on.
No.
I'm trying to get you out of here.
He didn't say that I could go. He didn't say that I could leave. I couldn't hear his voice. My hands twitched. I fearfully looked up at the loudspeaker, waiting for it to tell me to get back. They were always watching. There was no way he wouldn't know. It had to be a trick. Some scheme to see how loyal I was. But I couldn't refuse a command from a guard.
We're saving you.
Please. You're going to cause problems for me. I whispered, waiting for the words to come. He gave an irritated grunt, held his rifle in one hand, and wrapped his arm around my waist. He kicked open the door and pulled me into the darkness. I didn't know whether or not the voice would play. I tried to push his arms away and run back to where I felt safe. His grip tightened and the door closed and automatically locked. He led me down a long tunnel. I blinked, my eyes having grown accustomed to the bright lights, and the darkness was unbearable. Where are you taking me? I was led inside a room, made to sit on a wooden stool, and surrounded by metal lockers. There was another man who stood with his arms crossed, leaning on the lockers, and his facial expression was difficult to read. Something about them. I reached out and ran my calloused fingertips over the surface. I remembered a loud closing sound, sharp images of blood, muffled screams, and faces that blurred on familiarity.
You don't recognize us, do you?
Remember to stay focused. Your redemption will restore America. Selection will happen shortly.
The muffled voice on the radio came through the speakers. I felt like needles passed through my body and I froze, staring blankly, listening to the words. Nothing else existed. The one who stood was tapping my face, trying to get me to pay attention.
Newcomers, welcome to your redemption.
His words were sharply cut off. A loud electrical spark echoed through the facility. I jumped. There was that damned beep sound, and instantly I stood. I had to get back to standing in assembly. They wouldn't let me. There were flashing red lights and loud sirens. An alarm.
Shit, it wasn't supposed to happen so soon.
He yanked open one of the lockers, put me in an oversized jacket. It was dirty. Wincing, I tried to push him away. They put pants over my uniform and rushed to put the boots on my feet and putting a large hat on my head, half concealing my face.
Good enough. It will have to do.
He gripped my arm, his face close to mine.
Don't make a sound.
I started to remember that face. I'd seen him. Not here. I remembered the bloodshed. His face. Both their faces. Who are you? Neither of them answered me. The light was bright outside. It felt like a dream. I saw the blue sky with speckled clouds. I couldn't remember how long it had been since I saw the sky. The forest was lush and full of life. I could hear birds in the distance. And it couldn't be real. These things only existed in my dreams. I was taken to an encampment with others who had been removed from the program. There were doctors who would ask us a series of questions. My now filthy, formerly white uniform was removed, even when I was given other clothing to wear, and I felt naked without it. It wasn't how I remembered it. The semi-familiar rescuers would come, waiting near the door as though cautious of my reaction. His face was clean, and he was out of uniform, now wearing casual clothing. No markings except 3 scars under his left eye.
I don't want to hide this from you any longer. The reason why you're here, why any of them are here, he was with him when he took you.
Slowly I recognized them. The same soldiers who took Maria when that person I used to be died. I didn't say anything. I rolled over on the hospital bed, looking at the fabric of the tent, and waited until he left. I could still hear that voice in my head.
Congratulations. Your redemption is at hand. Congratulations. Walk through the door.
The words all jumbled up together. They were with me when I was awake, when I slept, and I kept yearning to be back in that room again. I despised myself for it, more when the reality of what the place was sank in, and I could still hear those words. We were kept away from the main force, contained in case we managed to escape, and made our way back here. Sometimes I could hear them talking. I saw families walking together, and was reminded of my own. It had been ripped apart. Did the leader have some family hidden away in some private section? Did they know what kind of a person he was? I didn't know. Do you know what happened to Ray? They shook their heads, avoiding my gaze, and I guess he must have been doomed to a dreadful fate. From what I was told, I was there for years. The leader's voice and the lure of the beat faded, but never truly disappeared. I contributed to the community, working the gardens, and I never spoke much to anybody. Old habits die hard. Over time they started to trust me, and I was permitted around families. However, I was never granted permission to hold or access weapons. I had to be reminded when it was time to finish work. I wouldn't stop, not until I was commanded to. One day a message came for me. I trembled when I was led down a corridor, fearful they were returning me to the prison. And finally, a military encampment appeared in front of me. Marching soldiers. army jeeps and artillery being prepared. When my footsteps tapped on the surface of the metal, it alerted a woman who turned to look at me. A large scar disfiguring half her face, her dark hair flecked with grey, tied up in a ponytail, and she was heavily armed, ready for war. I recognized her from the past. Maria? She winked at me and turned back to the force primed for attack. Everything is outlawed. This story contains disturbing content. Viewer discretion is advised. The day drawled on. It was freezing cold. I shivered and tightened my jacket around me. Patches had been sewn over the holes from wear and tear. Again and again. New clothing was a luxury for the elite. Second-hand was for the middle class. And everyone else kept reusing whatever they had. Who thought in 10 years everything would have changed? In an attempt to stop or slow down global warming, a new chemical was dispersed into the atmosphere. For the last 5 years, there has been little sunlight. Many of the farms and ecosystems had begun to collapse, and that caused massive food shortages. The weather was colder, and soon many industries began to shut down. The resource wars had been in progress for many years. And so, the world changed. Wars over water, farming land, and dwindling resources. First, it was oil, and extended to others. Most people were unaware of it happening, until it finally reached their doorstep. I rubbed under my eyes with my sleeve. So far, I've been waiting over an hour for the food line to move forward. In every city across the country, there were food shortages and government-sanctioned rationing. I never thought there would be a black market for baked beans. I heard a truck drive past and saw several large trucks, guarded by armed soldiers. The food trucks were reserved for the government and probably their families. I could hear people around me grumbling, glaring at the trucks, but no one dared to do anything about it. Society had become increasingly unstable. The line slowly crept forward, and each time, I'm worried the infamous close sign would appear, and we would be forced to leave empty-handed. So far, so good. There were only 3 people ahead of me, and I could see the bags of food. My stomach grumbled at the sight. I got to the start of the queue, and an exhausted-looking woman greeted me with a tired smile of recognition. "Hello, could I see your ID and your allotment card?" she asked, the dark circles under her eyes, hollow cheeks and marked skin, revealed she had survived one of the many illnesses going around at the time. I took my well-worn ID and my allotment card out, handed it to her, and she looked it over. I worried there'd be some new policy that would deny me food, but these fears were for nothing when she handed it back to me, lifted the bag, and said, "Good luck. This is your last bag for the next month." I took the bag and didn't bother to look at it. You got what you were given, and you were grateful for it. I lifted it up and held it close to my chest as I walked home. There was no way I was going to let someone take this from me. I walked home and wished I asked some people to come with me. I remembered when I used to have to worry about someone trying to steal my money, which was now worthless, and any valuable items I had left. Now, all people wanted was to take your food, water, or any information that could help you get either. I hurried home. I could feel eyes on me, and fortunately no one approached me. They were all too busy trying to get out of the stinging rain. I pulled my jacket hood over my head to protect my face. I could feel the burning sensation on my hands, and I couldn't do anything about that. My younger brother greeted me at the door. He was taller than me now, and was probably hungry. We were all always hungry. He looked in the bag, and we entered the small apartment we had been allocated after our house in the suburbs had been claimed for the hard-working troops and their families. I've always supported the armed forces and the sacrifices they made for our country, but how our government went about all of this was so incredibly dirty. My parents sat at the tiny kitchen table with a newspaper between them. Like everyone else, They would have been looking at the employment section, desperate for some kind of work that would help us. They didn't even look up at me. My brother put the bag on the kitchen table and started taking the canned goods out. I haven't seen fresh fruit or vegetables for years. The apartment was run down when we got here. There were cracks in the walls revealing the brickwork. One of the cupboards had its door taken off. The tiles were damaged and it was overall in poor repair. We tried to make it a home. We covered the damaged parts, put up little paintings, and it was still a far cry from the home we used to have before. Electricity was rare now. For people like myself, it only came on during set time periods during the day. And once that was done, that was it. No more. At night time we would freeze. And during one particularly bad night, there were reports of people dying of the cold in their homes. This nearly caused a riot that was only silenced by armed police, threats to deny us electricity and food, and most people complied to go back to their homes. That was when the pamphlets started. Families with elderly or sick family members were encouraged with the promise of higher food tokens to deliver them so that they could pass peacefully. Their sacrifice was for the good of the country and brighter days to come. At first, people refused, but as there were shortages of food and medicine, many elderly family members wanted to be taken to the drop-off points. The soldiers never answered what would happen to them. Years ago, I watched my grandpa get on the truck with the other people. He smiled at me, told me to be good, and I've never seen my parents so broken. My father changed after that. My family didn't watch while the truck drove away. I couldn't help but keep looking back as he was driven, and I hoped they were taken somewhere nice before they passed, even though I knew it was unlikely. I went out to sit on the balcony. Fortunately, it was covered so the rain wouldn't burn my skin, and looked out at the city. There were flames where people tried to light the place up, and to try to keep warm. Anything and everything was burnt. The stink of chemicals filled my nostrils, and I tried to block it out. I closed my eyes and imagined being on a small, grassy hill, with the sun on my face, and it was easy to breathe. Things could always be worse. I could have been taken to one of the camps or be on the streets. People always disappear from both of those places. I heard people fighting, yelling, babies and children crying, and the infamous security trucks driving through with the announcements. When I first heard them, it was blaring, but it had become normal. My mum called me in for dinner, and I went in for a tiny portion of food. I ate slowly and imagined more on my plate. My mum barely ate hers, and kept trying to give us some more of hers. No one accepted it, no matter how hungry we were. I went to sleep, shivering and wrapped in many blankets. We could never tell what tomorrow would bring. I woke up to a loud knocking at the front door. My dad walked over to it with a baseball bat and cautiously opened it. He saw a family, 2 dads and their children standing there. All they had were the clothes on their backs. One of them apologized to my dad and handed him a piece of paper. I could hear more commotion in the hallways, with there being a lot more people there now. This family was also allocated to live here in the apartment too. None of us were happy about this, yet it wasn't their fault. We welcomed them in and tried to make space for them. Later that night, the fighting was worse than it had been in months. We were already living in cramped conditions, only made worse by strangers moving in. Why the government had decided to displace even more people is unknown. There are rumors that the northern states are slowly being depopulated. I could hear the chatter from inside the apartment when my parents were talking to the 2 dads. I sat outside and wondered what we were going to do food-wise. How could we eat when they weren't able to? Later, I'd go out and try to come up with a way of getting more food. But I heard something that caused me to listen silently. One of the 2 dads told mine of a resistance movement. It was growing fast, and that we would all someday get our liberties back. My dad seemed intrigued by the motion, but my dad warned him that he has a family. If one person was convicted of a crime, the entire family was impacted by it too. I was naturally interested in this resistance movement. Who wouldn't be? A chance for our society to return to the prosperous one, I listened, and when I got a chance to speak with one of the dads, I took my chance. I asked him more about it, and he looked around to make sure we wouldn't be overheard. He told me they would be meeting down under the docks this evening, if I wanted to go with him. I debated this. Human trafficking and crime had become such a normal part of our lives. The risk hung over us like an ominous shadow. But going to the docks with a stranger I barely knew seemed foolish. Not nearly as bad as having a strange family move in against our will. Later that night, I said nothing and watched while he crept out of the apartment, down the fire escape stairs. I put the hood over my head and followed him at a distance. I followed the grey man technique as I walked through the streets. I wanted to blend in, to be forgettable. The closer I got to the docks, I could smell the foul aroma of rotting fish and polluted water. I wrinkled my nose. Years ago, the smell would have made me sick, but much like everything else, you get used to it. There were a group of gathered people standing under the docks. Legally, we were still able to go out at night and meet up with other people. Yet, this, I doubt it would have been considered to be okay. I hid behind several burnt-out barrels that smelled absolutely foul and waited. The man who I guess was the leader was of average height. Scruffy-looking man, who was flanked by two men who looked to be former military. He told us the founding fathers would never have stood for this, and we needed to take our country back. He laid down plans to ensure we would have enough food and housing, that kids would go back to school and get an education again, that we'd have medicine, that we would have fresh food again. The crowd was getting excited. He asked who wanted to join the cause, and several people raised their hands. There were flashing lights, and soon they were surrounded by the military, some in uniform, and others without. The would-be rebels were put into trucks, and their fates would be dark. Treason was punished severely. I hid and waited silently. I didn't want to end up on the trucks. However, that man's speech stayed with me. The lessons and teachings had left their mark. When I was sure they were all gone, I made my way home, taking the long way, and making sure no one followed me. I saw one of the dads on the couch crying. Word had already reached him about his partner. My parents were incredibly angry with me. My mum slapped me hard across the face for the first time, before she pulled me into a hard, unyielding hug while she wept. Her body rocked violently. I went to bed that night, hungry, and slept. I dreamed I was a rebel. I woke up and told my parents I would be in the markets trying to find some food, or other supplies we needed. Before everything went to shit, my parents were near enough helicopter parents, constantly looking out for me and keeping me safe. In this society, what was the point? My younger brother went to work with my father at the recycling plant. Hard work, little pay, and health issues. However, starvation was the greatest threat to us at the present. I have been asked to do some extremely disgusting things for items I used to take for granted. I watched other women accept, do the deed, and come back with the item in their hand, either numb or unable to look anyone in the eyes. Or sometimes, even worse, they'd come back empty-handed. I made my way through the streets and headed to the unofficial black market. Technically, no one had permits to sell anything, but the local government let it slide. There were people selling random items. One elderly man, no doubt a book lover in times past, had his book collection in front of him. Books were now for the elite only. His collection now would be used to start fires. Old technology, smartphones, laptops, desktops, no longer had any value. Designer or fast fashion was obsolete, the latter being a blessing on the already strained planet. People needed sturdy clothing that would last. I wanted to see if I could find some food. People's pets had long since been eaten, and some tried to release them into the wild. When food became too scarce, meat was always questionable, whether it was a rat, someone's pet, or perhaps even a human being. It was easy to just not ask questions and be thankful for having a full stomach. I smelled something warm cooking and my stomach growled. I saw a man selling unknown pieces of meat on skewers. When I asked him how much, he asked him for the rest of my food tokens and for a little fun behind his wooden cart. I suggested perhaps something else would be better. And did he need help to cook? I could do that instead. He told me he made his offer, and if I wanted the food, I would do it. I looked at the food, then back at him, then back at the food again. Already the food was desperately low. We always needed more food. I turned and walked away. Hopefully there would be another vendor I could purchase from. There was another selling some canned goods, but they were dented or bloated. I'm pretty sure a couple of them were even from the 1950s. There was no way I was going to bring those home. I wish I had paid attention to any survival tips or methods for foraging edible food. A lady was selling decent-sized bags of rice. Now this would be excellent. I ran my fingers through it and found random bits of plastic or tiny stones in it. Soon I realized it was mainly little extras to try to bulk it up. I sighed and asked her how much it was. The same ridiculous price. I asked her if I could have any bags with just rice. She shook her head and told me this was all there was. I offered her the same deal that was declined, and she agreed. I helped her sell her wares. She let me keep a quarter of the credits earned, and then sneakily gave me a small bag of pure rice hidden under the cart, clearly reserved for her prime customers. I thanked her and hid it under my jacket to make my way home, when I saw the soldiers. They were checking each of the carts for any contraband, which could mean absolutely anything these days, and the rules constantly changed. I held the bag close to my chest, breathed and kept walking straight. If you ran or acted suspiciously, it would only draw more attention to you. I walked past and tried to look natural when I felt a hand around my upper arm. I turned and looked to see a soldier's gas mask face close to mine. The soldiers never showed their faces anymore. "Stop!" His voice boomed, hostile when it didn't need to be. "Yes, sir? What's wrong, sir?" I answered politely, lowered my head, and tried to look as non-threatening as possible. "Lift up your hands. What did you buy?" he demanded. "Just some rice, sir. It's under my jacket. May I?" He opened it and pulled it from my arms. The soldier opened the bag and saw the rice. He went still. He reached out, grabbed me by my arm, and threw me down hard against the concrete. I hit my jaw and tasted blood. He and who I am guessing was his commanding officer were talking among themselves. Their heads occasionally looked in my direction, and the officer nodded, deciding my fate. The soldier lifted me up by my arm and led me to one of the infamous weathered trucks. I whimpered and pulled away from him. I've seen them countless times and never thought I'd be put inside one. "No, please," I murmured before being thrown inside. There were a couple of people in there already. Did my face match their sad, broken ones? I knew my parents would find out eventually. I looked out the back as the truck rumbled to a start. We began the drive and I glanced through the gap to see where we were going. I hadn't left the area near my apartment for a long time and was disgusted by what I saw along the roads. There were rotting bodies hanging from stripped trees and long poles with signs saying, "Treason," "Deserters," and another word I couldn't make out. The roads were lined with garbage, rusted cars, and makeshift checkpoints between different areas. I wondered what my old street now looked like. One of the soldiers must have noticed me looking out and closed the blind, making the truck completely dark inside. I don't know how long the truck drove for. One of my fellow captives relieved himself where he sat, and the place stank. I wrinkled my nose, and I imagined I was somewhere else. Anywhere else. I was back at the poolside relaxing with the smell of barbecue and the sound of my family enjoying themselves. The truck drove along a rocky road. We all bounced around inside, and my body bruised before it finally came to a jolted halt. My daydream broken. The blind was pulled open. It was dark except for the insanely bright spotlights down on us. A voice over a loudspeaker told us to get down and put our hands on our heads. I didn't wait to be yanked down and got down. my hands on my head. One of the soldiers, I'm guessing, kicked my knees out from under me to force me to kneel. I didn't say anything. I could hear the barking of dogs on tight leashes. It felt like forever I was forced to kneel, until who I'm guessing was someone in power spoke. For crimes against the NAG, you are all condemned to 50 years of hard labor. For crimes against the NAG, you are all condemned to 50 years of hard labor. Your crimes may be reduced for compliance, newfound loyalty, and dedication to the new American government. The call came out. We were separated according to perceived gender. Soldiers with rifles watched us and took us into the medical facility, where a cold-looking doctor in a lab coat waited. We were forced to strip, and I noticed how sickly all of us were. We were gaunt. Our lack of vitamins caused old wounds to open back up again, and we were all covered in random sores. Finally, it was my turn to walk in front of everyone naked. I sat on the cold metal chair and waited while the doctor looked me over. I felt like a lab rat to be studied. The doctor asked me if I was pregnant. I said no. She asked me if I had ever been pregnant. Again, no. Then asked if I had regular periods. I said yes, so long as I was getting enough food. They scribbled down some notes. I didn't know if I just made my life easier, or if it had become much worse. I was given a folded coarse grey uniform, and I was sent to be cleaned up. Normally I would have loved to have a proper shower. However, the water was freezing, and the masked armed guards watched while I bathed. I was told to cut my own hair, and then I didn't immediately comply. They warned me someone else would do it. I started cutting off pieces of my hair with the rusty scissors. I didn't know how much time I had to get the job done. I knew it looked terrible, and I mentally tried to block it out. I was finally able to dress, and barefoot I was sent into the dorms. There were rows and rows of bunks. Some of the women looked up at me, and others were too busy keeping to themselves to react. I wandered around, unsure what to do, and overwhelmed by what was happening around me. An older woman took me under her wing and told me this facility is where they tend to keep people alive. Did you see people go on the second truck? There was no way they would survive. The labor we did was pointless and infuriating. How did us pulling apart old pieces of rope help rebuild society in any way? Or us breaking old pieces of bone? Some looked more human than animal. The work was tedious and only ended late at night. We would wait for our meal, listening to propaganda about how the NAG were going to save America, that we should be grateful they are here for us, and we have a chance to prove ourselves to them. The loudspeakers kept repeating, and we had to place our hands over our hearts and recite. We give our lives to serve the new American government. We live and die by the mercy of the new American government. We owe everything to the new American government. The new American government will be the only ones who will save us. I live to serve the new American government. The bowls of gruel and bread were brought out. We devoured the food, occasionally biting our fingers. We were so hungry. We weren't permitted to speak, but that didn't stop people from trying. People were talking about how the rebels had been taken out. On the walls, there were posters of propaganda for the NAG. I had more food security in this facility than I did at home. There had been no word about what happened to my family, and nothing about any of the other cities. Every day was the same. The monotonous lifestyle, coupled with the difficult work, caused many people to try to bond with the soldiers or swear allegiance to the NAG. Some would even turn on their fellow prisoners, even if it wasn't true, and they received better quality food or were moved to the best bunks in the facility. My thoughts were of escape. Legally, I doubted my parents could do anything about it, and I couldn't escape to go home, because if I did, I couldn't imagine the penalty for harboring a fugitive. The soldiers' helmets meant we never saw their eyes, nor their facial expressions. One of them stopped, and lingered near me a little too long. The soldiers were representatives of the NAG, and therefore were protected by the government, even if they overstepped. He greeted me with my ID number, not my name. That was never used anymore, and told me to follow him. I didn't have a choice, and went along with him into the storeroom. I faced the wall so I wouldn't have to look at him. The soldiers hated being looked at for some reason. The door closed. I heard him press some buttons, and there was a whoosh sound as the soldier took their helmet off. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar face, and saw it was my younger brother, now older. He was a man and looked to be quite healthy. I stared up at his bearded face. He put a finger to his lips to encourage me to be quiet. We hugged, and it was so nice to see a friendly face. I couldn't help but hiss at him at why he joined them. He told me a lot had happened. It had indeed been years that had passed. Our parents were both dead. The other dad, the husband of the one who had been captured, had been an agent and reported my parents for some made-up crime. They didn't know what happened to me and believed I'd either been taken by the gangs or killed for meat. Our parents, along with others from our building, were taken and killed by firing squad. The children who remained were taken to camps, brainwashed into becoming the next generation of soldiers. There had been uprisings, and the NAG was getting worried. He told me he was getting me out of here. He wasn't sure how just yet. I nodded, and he told me to act like we had been intimate previously, the reason why I would be allocated extra food. I did so. When the other prisoners asked where I was, I told them, and no one batted an eyelid. One even suggested I do this regularly, in hopes of getting better food all the time. Maybe it had been a dream. I didn't see nor hear from him, for what I'm guessing were months, when I woke up to sirens. A loud booming voice told us we were to meet in the assembly hall, with a long line of other prisoners. I made my way there, only to be grabbed from behind with a gloved hand over my mouth. The grip was released, and I was struck by the butt of the rifle and fell to the ground. I woke up later in the back seat of a jeep. I was groggy, and looked to see who I was guessing was my brother. He sat with an unknown man. We were driving, and I took a peek out the window. We were in the desert, a sharp change in weather from the freezing temperature where we had been. It was empty, and I couldn't see people. I listened to the chatter between the two men. They talked about a place called the Refuge, and how things would change once we were there. I closed my eyes and was skeptical. I had heard the promise of change before, and received nothing. I woke up when we had arrived. They too had armed guards, but certainly lacked the cohesive uniforms the NAG soldiers had. They had old-world military uniforms, with random pieces of NAG technology, probably looted from killed soldiers. There were non-combatants around, farmers and other workers, and I recognized the suspicious look in their eyes at us. My brother got out, shook hands with someone I'm guessing had power within the settlement, and the stranger and I looked at each other awkwardly. He apologized for knocking me out, and asked if my head was alright. I told him it was, even though it still throbbed. It took me a long time to relax and come out of my shell. It had been years since I was imprisoned, and my mind still suffered. For a time, I was happy. The air out here was nice. The food was fresh, and my health greatly improved, and the socialization was pleasant. My brother and I would speak of times before things changed, the fond memories of our parents, the lives we would have lived otherwise. I began my self-defense training and learning a trade. Everyone worked in the settlement regardless of age. We were constantly on the lookout for spies or signs of NAG soldiers. Over time, we saw them less often. The word was they were too busy dealing with infighting within their organization to come after any rebels. Any of the information we received came from roaming traders who could not be relied on for truth or to protect us. We gave the impression that the Refuge was a smaller settlement than it was. We told them we were just a few families trying to make it. So far, they believed us. As expected, the peace we had here did not last long. I'm not sure how things were resolved within the NAG, but their forces became united again. We met with a group of escaped citizens who told us they wanted refuge. And naturally, one was a spy. It is interesting how one person can bring down something beautiful. The soldiers raided during the night, and my brother's friend, I can't remember his name, was killed. I had to pull my brother away to stop him running over to try to save the already dead man. And we left the refugees survivors to their fate. I'm not proud of myself, yet I had to choose survival. Surviving in the desert was difficult. My brother was particularly upset about the loss of his friend, and I hated how I couldn't help him. We wandered for a while before some caravanners took us in. They asked us prying questions about who we were, where we were from, and we tried to give them enough information to trust us, but not open us up for any revenge. For a time, we were safe, until we were picked up during the night by slavers, and taken into one of the main cities. I can't remember what it was called during the old world. The new name was Fort Dahl, and it was under the control of the NAG's favored citizens. The air was clear here. There was grass, flowers, and trees. It was beautiful. Homes were maintained and actually looked like homes rather than military camps. The people looked clean. Their clothing bright, maintained, and looked new. The women had their hair styled, and the children looked so healthy. I was brewing with envy. Everyone else struggled with the bare necessities. We were taken underground into a chamber. It was torture being out of the sunlight and being placed in a dark, dreary cell. We were left there for the night without food or water. The next morning the guards came down, stripped us, and we were checked for any injuries or parasites. My brother's tattoo on his upper forearm, the two C's with a single arrow pointed upwards. The symbol of the NAG was noticed. He was taken away to be interrogated, and I hoped he wouldn't be tried as a deserter. A thick, cold metal collar was placed around my neck. I was given coarse clothing and thick wooden clogs that made loud sounds whenever I walked. There was no sneaking when I wore these. I was told to mop the floors in the communal bathrooms. Despite the painful collar and the awkward clogs, this was far better than the camp I was in years ago. I didn't think. I just did my job and mentally blocked it out. I was left alone to work. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I had to be my late 20s now. Maybe even my early 30s. The last time I looked at my face, I was a teenager, and I realized I lost years of my life. I reached out and touched my face. The reflection matched my actions, and eventually, I turned away to get back to my work. I didn't see my brother. I didn't feel safe asking, instead silently listened. If I blended in, no one would notice me. Over time, I was told that if I behaved, I would be treated better. And eventually, I could be freed and allowed to live a normal life here. Our cells were all underground, mainly so the residents weren't forced to look at us and break the fantasy of their magical world where everything and everyone was happy. Months passed, the clogs on my feet were removed, and a smaller collar was worn instead. My food quality increased. During the night when the population were out for whatever social event occurred, the other enslaved people would go in, clean their homes, and disappear again. I wondered if any of them knew about us. Still, no word about my brother. I spoke to the man who I guess was in charge of those who were enslaved. He was kind to me, and would give me tips on how to improve. He did not have a name, but went by the title, First Man. I asked if he saw him. He took me aside and told me he was a deserter, and would be taken away. I told him he was my brother and the last family I had left. First Man told me he couldn't save him. He was to be executed because he had not responded to training, and therefore death was the only option. I asked if I could see him one last time, and he agreed, but just for 5 minutes. I was taken through the dark tunnels underground. I could hear muffled sound all around me, and the coughs of sickly men. I saw him. His bones poked through his skin. The muscle had completely deteriorated. His face was drawn in. He had scarring on his body that healed and then had been damaged again. Clearly his bones had been broken and reset at strange angles. We hugged, cried, and I can barely remember the conversation we had near his end. I'm just happy I was there for him. Those to be executed were taken far from the settlement, and I didn't know it had been done. I found out through gossip of the enslaved people that I had no family left. He was dead. I don't know how much time passed. In time, I was given the smallest of collars and given the most freedom. The magistrate's wife took a liking to me, and so I spent a majority of my time with her. The improved conditions and protection was a relief. Later, I was freed and worked for the wife instead. My work was reasonable, and I had considerable free time. These were the families of those who had caused my life to fall apart. I wasn't me anymore. I don't remember the name I used, and nor do I remember the name my parents called me. There were small incidents, missing items, gates that had been left open, and other smaller safety concerns. The magistrate and his wife were both becoming increasingly irritated. While there were no social movements that I knew of at the time, I knew they could also exist, and did my best to avoid anything that could jeopardize my position. I was comfortable, and as happy as I could be. Hate or judge me all you want, but those things were a rarity. The incidents gradually became worse, and I discovered the source of the issues. I found some newer people were determined to cause damage. I don't know what order or group they were, or if they simply wanted to create chaos. They reported me to First Man, and so I was taken back underground, where I was being held when I first came here. I shivered, and all the painful memories returned to me. I was taken into a room with no light. I don't know how long I was in there. No food, no water. All my memories blurred into one, and I saw my family speaking to me. I longed to join them. They reached out to me with their hands, their faces twisted, and my head swam. I was asked again to tell them what I knew. I don't know them. And the thick iron door closed again. It remained shut until the magistrate came in with soldiers. Their helmets hid their humanity, and he warned me that his wife's favor would not protect me if I didn't tell them what I knew. I told him that I didn't know anything. My brother's past dealings came back to haunt me. He plied one fingernail off at a time, the reason why they don't grow properly. I remember screaming, and now his bloodlust was up. It was difficult to hold him back. I don't know what he used. Something was shoved into my eye. The pain was incomparable, and soon I saw nothing out of it. I couldn't stop screaming as he yelled at me, demanding to know what I knew, and how dare I betray them after they had given me freedom. I swore repeatedly that I didn't know again and again. His voice changed, and the realization I wasn't lying must have set in. He didn't apologize. With nothing to say, he left me bleeding and alone in a cell. I was numb. I didn't speak when a nurse came and tended to my wounds. No matter what happened, I would always be an outsider here, and I'd have to make my own way. I'd never be one of them. No one apologized. I was taken back up and put on bed rest. My eye was gone, and the magistrate's wife gave me a beautiful leather eye patch that would have cost a good amount of credits. It covered the wound her husband devastated my face. I kept doing my duty, smiled, and was ever obedient and grateful. My opportunity to escape came when the guilty ones struck at the leadership when I was there. They came in with guns drawn, ready. They planned this incredibly well, during the changeover of the soldiers, and when the magistrate couple would both be alone. I got into an argument with them. They asked if I wanted to protect the people who killed my brother, who destroyed America, who ruined my eye and stole my life from me. They told me of a future where there would be no NAG, and there would be peace. There was no choice now. I accepted the offered knife. I felt a pang of guilt in my heart when I took the magistrate's wife by her clean, well-groomed hair and tilted her head back to expose her soft throat. She had been kind to me, rescued me even. It wasn't enough. I couldn't make out what she was murmuring, pleading, and I just I just couldn't listen to it any longer. I slit her throat while her husband screamed at me. He called me every vile name in the book. He spat that he saved me, and this was how I repaid him. I didn't want to see what my new comrades thought. I took the knife and drove it into his chest. I looked him in the eye as I did so. He whispered something I couldn't make out, and I stabbed him repeatedly, my face and body coated in his blood. I was quickly pulled from him, and while they were angry at me for breaking whatever plan they had, I showed I was now dedicated to their cause, and there was no going back for me now. Joining another group was not something I hoped for. We rounded the rest of the settlement up and drove them into the center square. They didn't endure the same way other people had, and they threatened us, telling us the rest of the army would be here soon, that we'd all be killed. It was an idle threat, and we all knew it. They were killed. Men, women, children. Decades worth of bottled up aggression was taken out on them. It wasn't an execution. It was butchery. Threats and slurs were written in their blood on the walls. The place was looted of weapons and valuable items before fires were set everywhere. If they couldn't keep or hold it, they would destroy it, so the NAG could not take it back. The rebel group, one of several smaller groups that would occasionally work with others. Their names have blurred. There are too many created and then disbanded. I met someone among them. He served as an engineer, and we got married. Not legally, although the law was a difficult thing to determine, since it depended on which group had dominance over an area at any time. The doctor told me I was unlikely to have children due to my age and injury. I focused on the health of the community I was in. We traveled between two different communities, and along the road, I found a small boy amongst the burnt remains of his family. He was mute, unable to tell me his name or where he was from originally. I took him in and raised him as my own. The established leadership were either getting older or had been killed in the various battles and skirmishes. I found myself gaining increased respect and responsibilities within the community. There were 5 rebel factions that were brought together under a single banner. Our resources now shared, and our territory had grown considerably. The tide was turning. The NAG had taken too much, being too power-hungry, and lost the respect of normal people. More of them started to join us with the promise of liberty and freedom that had long been denied to them. We did oppose the brutality of the NAG. We would forgive rather than brutalize our enemies. Many of the former NAG soldiers came to our side, only having joined due to pressure, being stolen as a child, or through the force of conscription. They were losing, and they knew it. There were some of them that were die-hard loyalists to the order, fanatical. They would tell us we didn't know what we were doing. I became the unofficial leader. In the rare moments I wasn't working, I would dream of a renewed country and world. It didn't take long before all the NAG settlements came under our banner. Sure, we had to use brute force where we can, and show them that we would punish those who rose against us. Loyalty was survival, and survival came at all costs. The final battle occurs in 48 hours, and will decide the future of our world. I hope you got everything you need. That is my life, and the course of it. I hope you got everything you need, and my tale inspires you to act. Or this could be your descendants' lives. Take the last fort. Defeat the NAG. It was strange sending people to their deaths with the hope of what would come. I listened while the radio sent back reports of the movements of the troops. Our valiant soldiers were fighting for our future. The radio boomed with cries of victory. I stood with a tear of happiness in my solitary eye. All the pain, all the bloodshed, and we were finally free. I was transported by helicopter to the site. There were still dead bodies and the smell of gunfire in the air. I placed my hands on one comrade's hands or another. Some prisoners were rounded up, and they will be offered one chance of mercy. I approached the podium where I would give the final speech. We have brought liberty back to our homeland. Our lives will be one of prosperity and rebuilding. We still need your help to achieve this. I have never been one for long speeches. All hail the New World Order. I hope you enjoy this story. What did you think of it? Let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. Don't forget to stab the like button, subscribe, hit the bell and leave a comment. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, Patreon subscribers and all my viewers. Thank you so much for supporting me. Don't forget to check out my social media accounts below, including my merch. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.